Today we get to hang out with my buddy Moran Cerf, a true polymath. Started out young in the Israeli military in one of their elite intelligence units, and then ended up working as a hacker in computer security. And to this day, is still in demand for that. But he had a weird experience getting some advice from Francis Crick to junk hacking and get into working on neuroscience, and he did. And so Moran's had this amazing career, some of the research that underpins things like Neuralink. These days, he's a professor in the business school at Columbia, where we recorded this conversation. I can't tell you how delightful Moran is. Super smart, very insightful, incredibly curious. He is difficult to pin down. Whenever I'm with him, he somehow is so good at asking questions and picking my brain that I hardly ever get to pick his brain. And so the podcast was a perfect excuse to put him on the spot. And I'm really thrilled that we get to share this with you guys. You'll notice that Moran still has a bit of an Israeli accent, and he talks faster than anybody I've ever met. So most of you guys are used to putting podcasts on 2x. This one you might want to put on 0.5.
I've never met anyone like it.
He could hack anybody's phone in a matter of minutes. Who is that guy? Who can do that?
Thomas is the most interesting man in the world.
He's one of my favorite people on the planet.
Inventor.
Wicked smart.
The master of cutting corners.
If you had a dead body in your trunk, who would you call?
He would get arrested immediately in a lineup.
I stood in line to get his autograph.
You know, his mouth can barely keep up to his brain.
I don't actually know what Pablos does.
A hacker magician.
Man of the future. Future.
One of the things I've been fixated on for a long time is trying to rescue hackers out of working on computer security and aim their brains at more important stuff. And I've gotten to do that some, both at the lab before and in some startup contexts, but independently you seem to have figured out how to do that on your own, which I think is great. A lot of what I love about hackers is they just have these minds that are good at figuring out what's possible, and I've talked about that a bunch in the past, but a lot of them I think are attracted to computer security because it's this bottomless pit of puzzles. It's not so much that they care about security, it's just that they like the challenge of figuring out how things work and breaking them and doing things you're not supposed to do. And I think that those minds are super valuable for invention and for doing other things, but a lot of times they get stuck configuring firewalls and useless shit because that's where the career opportunities are. And so somehow, independently, you seem to have evolved past computer hacking on security stuff and ended up in all kinds of wild places that other hackers haven't gone. And so I've just figured I would ask you about that.
How to live.
Yeah, how'd that happen? For me, I can tell you just quickly, hacking, working on computer security, there was a moment where I realized it's this perpetual war of escalation and we're never going to win. And I didn't want to play that kind of game. I wanted to play games where like we could actually come up with a solution and win. That's why I liked cryptography and protocols where we could maybe create a different way of doing things where you can win or prevent a whole class of things from being a mess. But I really didn't want to work on computer security and like networks and stuff. That wasn't interesting to me at all. And so I found a way out.
It's like a 12-step process. How do you not relapse back to hacking?
Don't relapse, yeah.
So I'll give you a kind of answer. I don't know who the audience is, but like I imagine a 22-year-old person.
Yeah, but fine.
And we'll target her for a second. So,
okay, fine.
So I'll give you an answer for her, and I'll give you an
or
answer
for me. The audience could be me.
So here's the answer. So every 2-3 years, they try to pull me back in.
Yeah.
Clear. And including now. AI has a cyber kind of component and new ones, and immediately say, oh, we need you. And so, so here's why I'll say the first answer on me, and then the big one on the wall. I think that hackers have 3 talents.
Okay.
One is they know how to code, understand computer. That's the least important one. This everyone can catch up, but they are, and I think you and I are lucky that we actually grew up in the right time. Computers were simple and get complicated, and then we had to do it all the steps, all the Lego bricks. So it became, now if you tell a kid, here's a computer and it has a kernel that does this, you lose them on the first sentence. If you didn't know what it was and you had to build it from scratch, so let's put it as anyone can get that, but we have an advantage. The second one I think that they are really good at is in psychology. Nothing to do, they just have this good ability to do theory of mind. And you can say, what would she think that I think of her and what are the boundaries of her kind of limitation. And that's one good kind of skill of theirs. And it manifests in the ability to say, what I would not think of, and she probably didn't think about it. For example, she's a programmer and she had to build the login page for Facebook. And she probably assumed that a username is someone's name, and names are between 4 characters to 20 characters, but no one would have a name of 1,000,000 characters. So she probably never in her code checked what happens if the name is that long. So let's try to put a name that's 1,000,000 characters long and see if it breaks the system, because she didn't think about it. That's a hacker thinking, say, I wouldn't think about it. She probably didn't think about it. Let's try that. So I think the third thing that hackers are really good at, that's it. Level 3, coding, theory of mind, and details. And what I mean by details is they are able to separate what they see from what their mind makes up. So that's classical magician thing. Magician shows you a card and says the word, you see they're all different. And you don't really look if they're all different. You hear them say that, you see the full card, and you tell yourself they're all different. And if you actually said, so wait, did I see that they're all different, or did I just hear him say that? And if you start saying, wait, I just heard the words, but I didn't really see that they're different. So maybe they're not different. Or maybe the person said that his hat is rattling because the bunny's inside. You say, wait, I saw a hat moving, but I didn't see a bunny. So if you can start saying, what did I see versus what am I thinking I've seen, you're good at saying, wait, I never saw this thing. It's probably not true. Let's check it. Those are the 3 things that make for good hackers. Those 3 things make for a lot of other things. Mm-hmm. They make for good banker. They make for good magician. Mm-hmm. They make for good politician. They make for good parent. And I think that if you say, okay, these are the things I want to be good at, you can start realizing that there's a lot of things you can make money out. And hacking is easy because the coding, they are in the job description. But if you realize that's good, you can do some other things. And that's thing for me. I was lucky. I met the right guy in the right time. And he basically told me, if you're a good hacker, forget about hacking. Go study neuroscience. And I just listened. So that's my only talent.
Is listening one of your talents?
It was a Nobel laureate in biology. So the guy I met was Francis Crick, who basically was a hacker during World War II.
Oh.
And when the war was over, he had no job. So he kind of said, what am I going to do? And he joined Watson, who was a biologist, who basically told him, I have this molecule that has all those A, G, C, T. I don't know what they make. Can you help me? You're a computer scientist, a hacker. Can you help me break the code? Together, they figured out what DNA was, got Nobel Prize, did a lot of good things in the world. And then later in his life, Crick started to do neuroscience.
Yeah.
And he realized that neuroscience has the same building blocks of DNA. When he met me, now he's 80-something, I'm 20-something, says, you're a hacker? Do what I did.
Yeah.
Leave whatever you do and go study the brain. And he was wrong in that every hacker is good at everything else, like he was, but he was convincing enough and it was with the title. So I just listened and he said, if you are willing to take a gamble and leave hacking and go do something else that I think is more important, which was neuroscience in his mind, I'm going to write a recommendation letter for you. So with this recommendation, everything went well. And this was my story. And here's the message that I'll build on what you said, that you for the 22-year-old girl that I'm imagining right now. The best thing that happened to me was that I was a soldier in the Israeli army.
Yeah.
And I was a very low-ranking soldier.
Yeah.
I started, like everyone, and was exposed to the highest-ranking soldiers. Okay. So when I joined, I was in a small intelligence unit that had a lot of kind of flat level so that you could actually see a 4-star general walking in the same corridors that you were. So I saw their lives and my life, and I realized that if you play your cards well in the military and you spend a lot of time, at one point, you're going to beat him.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone assumes this is what you want to do. So you immediately get offered, if you give 1 more year of your life, you're going to become an officer. And if you just pass this thing, you're going to become a 2-star. So you are in a pyramid that takes 40 years, at the end of which you become the 4-star general. After 3 years, I was discharged from the army like everyone else does and didn't climb to be anything else. And I became a civilian. And when I came back to the military to visit as a reserve kind of person after a year, I realized that civilian is even higher rank than a 4-star general. I get to tell him what to do, and I realized that all the time that I was in the military as a soldier, I assumed that this is the pyramid I want to climb in. And as soon as I left, I realized there are other pyramids. Yeah. I think that the best lesson for the 23-year-old is you have to first pick a pyramid. Because when you go to a company, you immediately are groomed to become the CEO in 20 years. If you keep doing well, you're going to become the CEO. And you immediately say, okay, I guess I want that. And you start climbing. You spend 20 years, and then you're the CEO. And only then you ask yourself, hey, do I want to be the CEO?
Yeah.
So you better first pick the pyramid. and then start climbing in. And I realized that, and since then I came to academia first, and it told me, okay, if you're in academia, you want to be first a associate professor, then a tenure professor, then a professor of, and you immediately are groomed towards a line.
Yeah.
And if you don't ask yourself first what I want to do, you're going to end up being there for the next 40 years. So step one is choose a pyramid.
Okay, cool. I have 3 lines of questioning here. What was the rationale behind saying that neuroscience was like DNA? What is the thing? That doesn't make sense to me.
So first of all, it wasn't,
Yeah,
it
why
was
did-
his.
did
Francis
he think
Crick.
that? Yeah.
I think so. I think that I can see why. So he basically was a computer scientist, let's call it.
Yeah.
He was a mathematician mostly, but he was a Turing kind of Bletchley Park guy
Yeah.
that knew a lot of computers and didn't know anything about biology. But someone said, hey, there's a code in this DNA, help me.
Yep.
The same way in his generation, which is 20 years ago, they thought the brain has a code in it. Like neurons fire, they fire at certain times. They
Okay.
tell a story. When they fire, when the neurons spike more, they say one thing. When they spike, they say something else.
Yeah.
When they spike not at all, they say a third thing. Some neurons do. It looks like a code. It looks
Okay.
like you can easily take a brain and make it into a series of time series with
Okay.
vectors. So it looks like a code. And also he was a hammer in a wall of nails. He knew hackers becoming,
Yeah.
it was him, von Neumann.
Sure.
If half the people who were basically doing something in World War II,
Yep.
building bombs and so on, the war was over, they go and do something and get Nobel Prize and something else. He thought, okay, all of the hackers of
Mhm.
1940 are Nobel laureate of 1950. So if I find a hacker, I should tell him to do that. That's gonna be the case.
Okay, got it. Did he manage to cause any others to defect or just you?
Tons. He's responsible for a
Oh.
bunch of, not always hackers. I think
Yeah.
this was new at the time. Like
Yeah.
this is, I guess, 2000. So
Yeah.
there weren't that many. But he's known to have taken people
Yeah.
from fields that he thought are helpful, like mathematicians, physicists, and so on, and tell them, forget whatever you do.
Yeah.
Study the brain, because he believed
Yeah.
and was very naive and very optimistic in this, that we're this close. I'm doing with my fingers like a very small thing. We're very close to discovering how consciousness works. This was his mission.
I see.
And he just said, if all the brains are
Mhm.
going to be on it,
Mhm.
in my lifetime, we're going to figure it.
And did you find him compelling in a way that would have been true without the Nobel Prize, or do you think that just the gravity made you listen to him more?
So Francis Crick is a character.
Yeah.
He's very compelling. It's like a celebrity thing. When
Yeah.
you go to a room and everyone
That's
is kissing someone's ass,
Yeah.
Nobel Prize or not, you think, okay, he must know
must know-
something.
yeah.
You gravitate to this, like it's hard to separate anymore. Like why do people kiss? Like I was in a room just a few days ago with a lot of rich people.
Yeah.
And one of them, I can't say his name, but he's a very wealthy person that most people in this kind of audience know. And he was talking and he said something that's clearly wrong.
Yeah.
Along the lines of, I don't know, Canada and the US aren't neighboring countries. Something that it's really easy to prove.
Yeah.
You open
Sure.
map.
Yeah.
But he said that. And I knew right away this is wrong.
Yeah.
And I first smiled because I thought he was making a joke. And then I realized that he was saying it because he was mistaken.
Yeah.
What was amazing is that there are a lot of people there
Yeah.
who immediately agreed with him. And those were people that were level below on richness. And I think that there's a pyramid of richness. And if the very rich person says it's nighttime when it's daytime, everyone's going to say, what do I know? It's
Yeah.
probably...
He's richer than me, must
Yeah.
know. And I think it's an important experience. I've had that experience a lot of times too. And what I find is that with people who are super wealthy, they really tend to suffer from this dynamic where they get treated as if they know about everything, like an oracle. And very few of them have the self-awareness to combat that. But because most of the people I know made the money in the tech industry, even there it can go wrong, because the ones I knew, obviously everybody knows, I worked with Jeff Bezos and I worked with Bill Gates, and I could see how they would combat that and surround themselves with people who would argue with them. And it makes a huge difference. And I think a lot of people don't know that, but it's something you really want to keep an eye out for, because even if in that moment, if you had said, hey, I think you kind of got that wrong, it might not have been your job to do that there, but see how they react. And if that's the person who shuts you down, then they're basically creating a vacuum to suck all the intelligence out of their brain.
That was very disappointing.
It is disappointing, and it's sickening, because society, like you described, will overvalue these people because they're rich. That doesn't mean you're smart, it means you're lucky in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
It could be a mix of both. And I see it too, because people ask me what I think about politics or education. That's like, I was talking about nuclear reactors, doesn't mean I know who you should vote for. I try to at least diffuse some of that, because I really need people to challenge me. And I don't need them taking my advice on things I don't actually know about. I could make some shit up about anything, but it doesn't mean I know. Just to wrap it up on the on the thing about hackers. I met this guy almost 20 years ago. His name's Rick Dakin. He's like an author. I don't even know if I never read his books. I don't know if he's any good. But we were at ShmooCon, which is a hacker convention, and we were talking about the minds of hackers. And what he said is that a normal person, if you give them a new gadget, they'll ask, what does this do? And they just want to know. And you can explain, it says on the box, whatever. It's an iPhone. Hackers will ask, what can I make this do? And so their mindset is not about what's written on the box. They're not reading the directions. They're violating the warranty. They're going to figure out how to break it apart, figure out what you can build from that. And that was the best description I ever heard. And I've said that a lot of times and not given Rick credit for it. But it was a really great way, I think, of distinguishing between how those minds work and why it's different. Because you're not going to invent a new technology by reading the directions. And you're not going to make a discovery by reading the directions. That you have to ask different questions. You have to try different things.
Now it's also cheap to become a hacker, as in everyone can code. Like,
oh yeah.
When I was a kid, it was expensive.
Oh,
like, you actually have to buy all kinds of gadgets. But I remember, I had what I could afford as a kid.
Yeah.
But at some point, I couldn't remember what was the leading issue, but there was a laptop that I had. And laptops were already extremely expensive in the year 1994 that was broken.
Yeah.
So someone gave it to my parents, said it doesn't work, your kid can play with it, and I got it, and I knew it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And they said, I don't know, maybe you can do something with it, and so on. And I think I had a little brother, I was probably, let's say 6 years old. My brother was 2 years old, something like, the gap was something like this. And I couldn't remember what was the prompt, but we decided to break it. Yeah. But to break it, we took hammers, and we just broke it to pieces. And it's the first time that I allowed myself to do it, and pieces fell off, but when it opened, you see the inside.
Yeah.
And then we both froze. He's 2, and I think he basically barely can lift a hammer. I'm 6. I can not really break the plastic easily and so on. But you start seeing, I think that I remember that even for him, as a kid who doesn't really understand what's going on, that we both look at it, and it's light bulb, we see how it works.
Yeah.
I guess this screen is, in the end, this wire. That's all it is. Like all the screen that's the wire that comes from the screen. Somehow, all the things that we see go on this wire. Okay, I guess images are cable. And then we see that keyboard, you press them and they are also like 50 wires. I think that to me was a moment. And even to him, I still ask him about it, and he still talks about like this thing that he does since many times, which is breaks things with his kids. And I think when you break something, you see how it works. I think most things we just never try to break them because they come and why would you break an iPhone? You just spent $1,000.
Yeah.
If you at some point take the old iPhone and break it, you understand how iPhones work.
That's a great story. I'm just, now that I'm older, I'm imagining you at 6 and your brother at 2. I'm thinking, no eye protection, smashing a laptop with a hammer. I know what happens. I have done that, and you will get shards in your face. So yeah, I've obviously gone soft. I remember thinking over the years, I've lamented, because I had, of course, that experience with computers that you could take apart, and they were made of screws and stuff. But my kid grew up with an iPad, and it's basically like laminated together. It's like not something that comes apart. And I have lamented a lot of times, as a lot of curmudgeons do, that all the stuff in the world is basically just like we're in your office. If I open up that display, it's just a circuit board with chips on it. That camera, same thing. That keyboard, same thing. It's a piano keyboard. Almost everything is just a circuit board with a chip on it. And so it's all the same stuff. It's not very observable. And that's much different than the generation before us, which grew up with muscle cars, where you could get in there with a wrench and take the head off and figure out what a camshaft was doing. It is observable in a different way. And I remember complaining about this with another buddy of mine, a hacker, Sammy Kamkar. And Sammy's just couldn't understand what I was talking about, because he's much younger than both of us. You're younger than me, but he's younger than both of us. And he's like, no, you just need different tools. I'm like, yeah, but it's glued together and stuff. He's like, well, yeah, but you can just go in with an ion beam and decap a chip. I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, you just use some acid, you take the top off the chip and you can see all the transistors. I'm like, okay. And he's like, I just use a disassembler and I can just see what's going on and fuzz the whole thing. I'm like, okay, fine. And so Sammy had just grown up in a different era. The tools are different, and he still has that mindset, which is really great. I think it is a little less accessible and is more esoteric And he figured out how to navigate that. One way or another, I think the key thing is, and it's great that your brother's figured out he can break things with his kids. I sort of wish I had.
I'll give you the failure. You know what? I have one failure that I'll tell you that I never managed. And there's one thing I never managed to do, which is break into a car. Not into the car. In the movies, you see the character goes in the car and they connect two wires and the car ignites and they...
Oh.
This I tried...
To hotwire a car?
Yeah, never.
You never hotwired a car?
Never managed. So I had a car when I was living in California. I had a car that was like $1,000 car. So if the kind of remote to open it had the battery kind of die, you couldn't get in. The key didn't open it. So it died occasionally, and I had a kit to break into my own car, like, kind of the way locksmith, old school, like you can inflate the window. So this I knew.
Slim Jim or something, yeah.
But then when you get in the car, and you have no key to ignite it, and you have no battery, so you somehow have to start it. Never managed to. So this is like the one hacking thing. I tried many things. I tried YouTube videos. Apparently some of it is illegal. But I think probably it's because they're still expensive and I'm afraid to really cut wires fully in the car.
I think it's also a problem, like we described, where you're just like a few years too young. Because I grew up in Alaska in an era before cars had computer chips. And I just had a Slim Jim in my car all the time because it's Alaska. It's freezing cold. You need to be able to unlock your friends' cars when they lock themselves in. So we had the whole system down.
So it works.
And it works because what you do is you Slim Jim in, you pop the hood, and then you can just, even with just a screwdriver, you can just short out between the battery and like the starter, and you could make a car start.
Is it? That's all it takes?
Yeah, you could do it. You circumvent the key and everything. You just power the starter, and it would go. And but this won't work now because all the cars have electronic ignition and all this kind of crazy shit. And I don't even know what a starter is in a modern car, and they have alternators instead of generators, so maybe they're not DC. I don't know. Anyway, that's
on my back. The one thing I remember as a kid trying, as an adult trying,
interesting. No, and then Sammy again managed to steal cars by hacking the keys and hacking the whole key access mechanism, and then one buddy of ours, I guess I shouldn't name him, figured out that he could manipulate the key.
Okay, call everyone Jeff Bezos. No.
This is not Jeff. This is a hacker that people would know. He figured out how to manipulate the key to open every car from that manufacturer. So he can just drive by the dealership, bloop, open all of them at once. And what are they going to do? Like, he never published it, but I think because what are they going to do? A recall on every car? It's crazy. This is before system update was in cars. And anyway, okay, I have another idea I was going to ask you about that maybe you would have much more advanced thoughts on than me. So one thing I noticed was, obviously learned about computer viruses very early. And then as viruses evolved in computers, my first experience was like on mainframes trying to steal resources from other users. So I'd make what we would call a virus now to go give me because in a mainframe, you have limited storage and limited processing memory. And that was like the early 80s. So I got to watch it evolve. And then through the kind of late 80s through the 90s, there were these companies like Symantec and McAfee probably paying people to write viruses to justify the market to buy antivirus software for mostly Windows. And anyway, it was this kind of cat and mouse game over time. And then of course, that's all gotten more sophisticated on the internet. And now you have these really advanced intrusion detection systems and anomaly detection systems trying to identify new stuff quickly, and libraries of keeping track of all the old ones. And especially through COVID, everybody became a junior virologist. And you can see how the language used to describe COVID really maps to computer viruses very well. It's almost uncanny. And it's funny because it's a reverse analogy. We call it computer viruses because it's an analogy to biological viruses. But now it's almost the other way around. It's like the computer virus analogy is much more evolved because we've been doing it in our lifetime at a much larger scale, and it's a game that's been evolving quickly and advancing, and the technology gets applied. And so now we're at the beginning, in some sense, of going through those same developmental cycles with biological viruses. And of course, we have vaccination for 100 years or something, and we have evolved our thinking about viruses. And of course, now with mRNA and stuff, we're doing new things, and science is really focused on it. And because of COVID, a lot of attention and money and resources aimed at that. But I basically expect it to play out in a very similar fashion. Like you're going to end up with IDS. You're going to end up with a anomaly detection that's going to be widely deployed. It's going to say, oh, here's a new thing. Here's a new critter we've never seen before. And immediately, like that should almost in an automated fashion kick off like the process that everybody knows from the origin of the BioNTech mRNA vaccine, where it's like, oh, we modeled a bunch of them in software. 24 hours after we got the sequence of the COVID virus, we were able to make 20 candidates for possible vaccines. And then we started testing those. And we eventually picked one that we made 24 hours after identifying COVID and sequencing it. That in a computer system, in a computer virus, like that's all automated. We have all that. We have intrusion detection. We're like anomaly detection. We're like, okay, there's a new virus, new thing coming into the network. It's spreading like crazy. We've never seen it before. Boom. We're going to tell the firewall or whatever to start blocking that. You've seen all this stuff. The point being, we're going to end up in a world where we have to build all that same stuff, but for biological viruses. And I think the analogy holds for quite, as far as I can project, that's what happens.
I agree with you. The bottom line, I think that of what I'm saying that I agree with is like the line are getting blurrier between digital and organic.
Yeah.
And I think I was patient zero of this thing.
Oh.
In the 1990s.
Oh.
I got a computer virus.
A which?
I caught a computer virus.
So you caught a computer virus.
So I had a kind of PC 386 that had a virus, and like maybe the Pong or something very kind of old school virus. And in trying to fix it, I actually opened the hardware. I can open the case, and it was dusty, and I blew, and some dust flew in my hair, and I was sick for 2 weeks after. So I'm pretty sure. So whatever was there, I caught it. So this was like patient zero of a computer virus migrating into a biology, and whatever it was there, I got Pong.
You
got Pong for 2 weeks.
You got blaster.
Yes. But the second question is that, first of all, I think that the difference between digital and organic is becoming blurry because we use synthetic codes to. I was just like across the river from where we are. It's like this company that makes perfumes. And perfumes is really molecules that you combine somewhere, and typically it's chemists putting together. But right now this is the B2B business that really makes perfume for all the others. Like if you just walk in the hallway, Chanel 5 and Prada, they make for everyone. They're the ones that actually make the compound that you then put in a bottle and then you sell it at different stores, but it's the same guys making it for everyone. And what they do is they have Kim Kardashian show up in a factory and she says, I want something that reminds people of the ocean and femininity. And like they translate words in English to, okay, this requires putting a little carbon here and a little bit of calcium there. And like that's what they do from beach and femininity to molecule.
Yeah.
That's their job. But in the end, they realize that all they do is they take their brain and they hear words coming out on one side and they turn it into chemistry on the other side. Computer can learn their brain and do the same thing. So now they have codes that feed words of Kim Kardashian on one side and turn that into a kind of lexicon that kind of say, okay, for this, we're going to make this thing. It has to be distinguished from that thing. It has to be, that's how they make perfumes on scale.
Yeah.
And then they, as we know, if you have code, you can make it deterministic, like really it does from A to B always, or we can have hallucinations where you add some statistics into it and you say, we don't want all the perfumes to be the same. So let's add 80% of surprise. And like instead of choosing calcium, you just decide that you're going to choose whatever is next to calcium in the periodic table, and you do that. And if it smells okay, and you try to guess and invent new things. So they now have hallucinations there. Hallucinations in chemistry could be a virus. It could be, or it could be something bad. It could be explosive. So they're debating on what's the right amount of hallucination that they should allow from celebrities saying, I want this perfume to it becoming a, but once you go there.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Doesn't remind me of femininity or the beach, but it's just something.
But you're right. Like what is, so some, and if you think about this machine as like a brain, many of things were discovered by mistake. So our brain did the same thing. Our brain kind of heard words or heard some experiences and turned them into tests. So it's not that machines are doing something that's outrageous. And most viruses that were invented are also someone tried to mix something. Think of mad cow disease, right?
Yeah.
It's actually, at the end of the day, the way I understand it, cows have a lifespan of X, and someone had the idea when the cow is dead to basically ground the meat from the cow and feed it to another cow. So you save money by, instead of making new food you give, but the enzyme that live in one cow typically decay with the lifespan of a cow. But if you basically put the dead cow into a living cow and into another living cow, you basically make the enzyme live longer, and suddenly a disease that should have not exist became a disease.
Right.
So that's a human idea of how to make the world more efficient, leads to a molecular or biological entity getting a longer lifespan, which leads to it doing what it naturally does but didn't do before. And I think there are many molecules that have like half-life of shorter, and we can now expand it. So
Which is wild, because a version of that is probably true for every animal.
Yeah.
And even though cows are not carnivores, like we wouldn't expect them to eat dead relatives, even for carnivores, like we don't eat dead relatives, even if we're like
right.
cannibalism is pretty rare in humans unless we're really desperate. And other carnivores don't either. And probably because of they have some evolved mechanism to keep them from wanting to do that. Whereas I don't know what you have to do to dead cow to make it palatable to cows.
But it's not too hard to imagine. Right? No. So now the machine, all they do is they just hallucinate. And a machine could have invented the idea and said, hey, we can make it, if you add a little bit of this to the dead cow, you can make it palatable for a living cow. So now this is to your point that as you enter with you take organic kind of molecules.
Yeah.
That's the bedding of the thing that you combine. But you bring either a human brain or a machine brain, and you just say, let's mix them. Suddenly you basically create viruses. And the machines are good in inventing mutations and trying new things. So in that sense, like the viruses that are really going to be the new thing could be just us taking Lego bricks, which we call nature, and organizing them differently and coming up with it. I think they'll be better. And machines are also good in mutations. The same way, if you created a virus that, I don't know, does something when it gets to the number 9. Like it waits for the 9th of September and then it does something. And I create an antivirus that looks for the number 9. And when it detects that stops the virus from happening, I can easily create code that says, when you get to 8, jump to 10 and subtract 1. And you never have to put the number 9. And there I override, and then you have to write a code for that. So it's easy for machines to say, okay, what are they detecting? I can easily create a trick that will skip that detection test, and that the race began to create.
Exactly. I've often, or for a long time, thought I learned more about computers than biology. But what I saw, like when you look at, I started with an 8-bit processor. It was like 1 kilohertz. So it was just very constrained. And because of that, engineering for that was entirely about just trying to save bits. I learned to code by reverse engineering the assembly language for that chip, which means I suck at coding. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just like, I just try everything and throw out what doesn't work until you can control it. And the thing about it is you could see, and I'm not one of them, but like people who are like firmware coders or people who write BIOS or who write for microcontrollers, they're very efficient about their code. And 99% of what that processor is doing is what it needs to do and nothing else. And then what you saw over my lifetime is as soon as we got faster and faster computers, what we started to do is like waste resources on the computer side to make the coder more efficient. And so now we have these huge libraries of basically Lego bricks. What programmers are doing today is incomprehensible to like programmers from the 70s and 80s because they're just taking Lego bricks and sticking them together, and the next thing we have an iPhone app. And like I load an iPhone app, and it's 400 megabytes, and all it does is show me my travel itinerary. And it's 400 megabytes of code to show me a travel itinerary because it's just loading with a lot of extra crap. And it doesn't really matter because we have so much storage and processing and memory and all that. So anyway, the point is, over my lifetime, let's say we got to a point where like computers are like wasting more resources to make the human more efficient. And I think where it goes is much more like biology. Like you and I are like 99% error correction. Like cells are dying off all the time and somehow you still keep going for 60, 80 years or whatever. Or we'll give you 80, 100 years now that you're dead. I guess stick around for a while. But the point is, you can see that has happened. And I was right about that. Probably other people had this observation. But what machine learning is, and like LLMs, as we know, are like a super shitty way to do language. This is just brute force. And we've thrown so much processing power at this algorithm that we can actually make it do language, even though it's like obviously way less efficient than what the brain is doing. And so there's a there's this point where I think we just get to a world where computers are like 99% error correction. They're like fucking up all the time. That's what an LLM is doing. And in the middle, over time, through reinforcement learning and these other things, you're building the guardrails. You're building, we call it guardrails now, but you're building the thing that sort of steers it towards what you want more of and away from what you want less of. And that is obviously what evolution did with us. It's okay. The things with one eye didn't do as well as the things with two eyes. Psh, bam, keep two eyes. And then, the things that, I don't know why we have hair, but like some things have hair and they perform better. So now we make them hairy. So then everything
keeps that warm.
Keeps right. So there's that process that we went through. And so just coming from the other direction, I think our computers head there, and that's where they get really powerful. And that's why we're so obsessed with AI now, because that's essentially what it's doing, is it's wasting all the processing to just try everything and throw out what doesn't work.
If I would wear the neuroscience hat, or I would say that generally our brain, if you look long enough time span, it creates new structures to learn new things.
Yeah.
And it takes the old things and moves them under the hood. So more and more things in our brain that were for 100,000 years being processed becomes automatic. We don't have access to them. They just happen. And every time we have a new brain structure that's evolved, it's for new things that weren't on the menu, and within a few years, it becomes on the menu. So to take your example, let's take a concrete one. So for instance, emotions, a good example.
Yeah.
Right now, you still have access to your emotions, but mostly they happen to you. Like you don't really say, oh, my daughter is sick. I should feel sad. Let's turn on sadness for 10 minutes. Okay, enough. Let's stop it. Like it's not really how it works. You don't control it. You can input a little bit, but mostly it happens to you, and it dawns on you. Like you suddenly feel sad, and maybe you do something's going to stop it, but it's really happening to you. That's a step towards it's totally happening without you. And if you go back in time, there was a time where emotions were a decision-making process. So there was a monkey in the savannah, let's say 1 million years ago, who sat there and saw a tree with a banana, and it was hungry. And he said, I should go and get this banana. And then it saw that there was a lion 200 meters in the other direction, and the lion was also hungry. And he said, okay, let's see. How fast do I run? How hungry am I? How hungry is the lion? How fast does he run? And it basically opened an Excel table. And it put on the left side, monkey speed, lion speed, number of bananas in the region, number of monkeys in the region, how high is the tree, how fast can monkey... It just did a long Excel. We did a calculation, and it came up with, this is a bad idea. Shouldn't go there. I should go home, and I'll come back tomorrow. And this monkey survived, and its friend who did the wrong equations didn't survive. So we're the descendant of all the monkeys that first did calculations in a complex way with Excel tables and like pivot tables and so on, and survived. And over the years, they became better and faster to the point that some point the brain said, okay, you know what? We should just compress all of this complex equation into one thing, which is you feel scared. So a monkey looks at the tree, looks at the lion, gets scared, doesn't really know anymore that under the hood there was a big table. It just feels scared, escapes. And now when we're the descendant of this monkey, we basically do that. Like when your kid goes to a dark alley and says something doesn't feel right, that's her summarizing 100,000 of years of monkeys doing Excel sheets in the feeling of nothing good's going to come out of that, I should go. And I think that's a step towards from front brain calculations to middle of the brain feeling. And other things that we do right now, which is like we calculate now decisions about whether we should marry him or take a job in Alabama, or like all kinds of things, virtually are now gradually becoming automatic and also a feeling. So in 10,000 years, you can imagine a kid just feeling that they should get a job in Alabama.
It seems like women are really good at doing that all the time.
So you're joking about it. I think there's generally, like we can already see if you bring 100 people to the lab and test them on decision making, we test them on decision making of the kind of Excel table type today, you can see that some people have much better intuitions on that. And in a way, if you think of what intuition is, it's just teaching the brain that. If you become a trader in Wall Street, first you have no idea. You just use Excel tables. And at some point you develop over the tens of hours of doing that, like mechanisms in the brain that tells you, I don't even know why, but I'm looking at this Bloomberg screen, and this is a bad idea. And if you force me to, I can tell you why, but I right away feel it's not a good idea. And that's why senior traders, they are faster in telling junior traders what to do because they learned to feel it. And generally, the brain moves from thinking hard to feeling it.
But do you think that like the feeling it part, we probably have that, but we have variable ability to trust our instinct?
So it's always a trade-off between if you turn everything to feeling,
Yeah.
you're going to also miss. So you basically what you do, you take patterns that you've seen, and you say, this looks like the pattern I've before, so this is what I do. This is what chess masters, they just look at the board for a fraction of a second, they know what to do. And it's a constrained world, but you will miss. If someone makes something that looks very similar to a pattern, but changes one thing, and you immediately snap, say, oh, this is the pattern I know, I should do this, they will win. So it's always a balance between, so some traders senior trader will just say, oh, bad idea, and they're going to miss the. So in life, if you're looking for advice as a trader, I would say you develop this expertise and you either randomly every now and then try to just not trust. One in 10, you just say, I'm going to do the equations with the monkey and the banana just to see if I should trust my emotions fully or not, or maybe 1 in 100, like you choose it. Or you say, okay, I accept that I'm going to miss some good trades. They're going to be good trades. I'm going to feel that they're bad. I'm going to go away. And some young trader is going to actually go there. And that's...
It's a fascinating way of describing it. I know it's like a little bit cliche, stereotypical thing to say, but women tend to be willing to trust their intuition. And I think they're encouraged to do that. Whereas like for guys, it's infuriating where women are like, willing to make snap judgments about people from, there's like, oh, that guy's creepy. What the fuck? He didn't do anything. Like, innocent until proven guilty. He's got a creepy vibe. And then it turns out she was right. Okay. Those kinds of things are probably valuable, whereas guys are just not willing to accept it without some real, without the Excel spreadsheet.
If you go, there's a book I like, Sex at Dawn, that basically looks at gender and sex over years and tries to explain. And they basically, so if you think now that for million years, female monkeys were doing Excel sheets, but they had another parameter there that says creepy or not, and what's about, and so on. And the male monkeys didn't do this thing. In their neural systems, they now have creepiness as a parameter that kind of amplifies.
Or like you said, they collapse the spreadsheet into a simplistic algorithm. That's their intuition. It works most of the time. And the guys are just more suspicious of that, or have learned to tune it out and go back to the spreadsheet.
And the reward function at the end is also, if you're a female monkey and he's a creep and you miss that, the price is higher. Yeah,
that's a big deal. There you go. Whereas for the guys, it's if a guy is creepy, it doesn't bother me at all. There's literally no risk. I'm not having any problem with it. So I don't have a reason to have an intuition about that. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. I hadn't thought of that before. Anyway.
We are the creep, that's why. Millions of women out there point to you. This is like the patient zero.
Like we have to give the guy a chance. Maybe he just hasn't. Yeah. Okay. So you sort of extrapolate and say, all right, we're going to get 2, 3, 4 orders of magnitude more computational ability over the next 5-10 years. I need to do some numbers but something like that is happening. And it means that even for things that we would use Excel for now, we'll be able to waste a lot of resources to do like a giant computational model, end up with the same answer. That's what's going on now when you like ask ChatGPT to like tell you about George Washington or something. So you could have looked on Wikipedia, would have been dramatically less resources, but you can waste a lot more and have ChatGPT go and reconstruct the Wikipedia entry for you. And I think that's what will happen. I saw a headline today that was like, building guardrails should be part of the process in developing AI. And I just thought that was an idiotic headline because I'm like, what you're doing when you make a machine learning model is you are pruning it. You're training it. You're trying to get it to do the thing that you want it to do. You're trying to get it to stop doing the things you don't want it to do. That's just part of building the thing. And this guardrails thing is not about the technology. It's about you didn't figure out that you don't want it to do this dumb thing, like the hallucinating thing. That's a temporary condition. It may not be completely solvable, but it's mostly solvable because we'll eventually train like, okay, don't talk about Hitler ever. And then don't do this other weird shit. And over time, you just get better at defining what you want it to do. We're going to end up with this multitude of AIs that are all trained to do different things well, and each one will be tuned for its purpose, and they'll invoke each other when they need to. And I think this is all very practical to do, and most of that'll happen this year. So then we get to a point where now you can rely on computers to do mostly the right thing most of the time in this inefficient but very flexible and adaptable fashion, and that's getting closer to what brains are doing, I think.
So I'll say, I agree in the kind of scenario laid out that we started with what we call a bag of words. We basically said we don't have energy to be smart ourselves.
Yeah.
So we're going to take all the words in the world, in the dictionary and in the world, put them in a big bag, shake it a little bit, and see what comes out. And this is LLMs, and it works. So but it's extremely inefficient. We basically had to spend $60 million per iteration of GPT and about 6 months of training for it to come up with the right weight so it can tell us who George Washington is. It works. So people are happy and it's inefficient. And we already know now how to do it better.
Yeah.
And now version 2 would be some small companies are going to be able to beat
We know
OpenAI.
how to do it better because we've figured out what the important part is, and we've figured out how to prune the training data and that kind of thing. And then we know how to do it better because we also have way more computational ability to throw at it right now.
So people even knew that 10 years ago, but we didn't believe. So AI had a bad kind of decade or so people didn't try. And then what the companies that did it right now did is they proved it and everyone now is in. So now you get the money to do it, you get the time, you get the energy, support. So we knew, but now we have the backing.
Now we have the proof.
That's all that was
I
missing.
think is one of the big misnomers. I mean, people think that the genius of OpenAI is that some breakthrough or that it was transformers. I think you could probably take some shitty AI algorithm from like the 80s, and if you applied as much computation to it as OpenAI did for ChatGPT, like we would for GPT-4, you would probably still get maybe not as good a result, but you could still get it to prove the thing was possible.
And I think that when we start to dig into them, we see also that many times they just give you text as is. Like we imagine it as like an autocomplete kind of sometimes it like it just says, okay, I guess he asked about Wikipedia. Just like
I think that is probably, my guess is that is because at least in ChatGPT, they have a huge incentive to reduce the cost of running that thing. Exactly. And so I'm guessing that in a lot of these cases, what's happening is like they figure out the question is very similar to a previous question.
Exactly.
Or it's like basically asking for Wikipedia and it just does that.
What we know about humans is that they're extremely predictable.
Yeah.
Every query that you think you invented, write me a song about me. Someone already asked. All you need to do is find that in the database and just give it to you and change one name.
And that's why the training data has most of this crap in it, because the stuff people are posting on their blogs and stuff is all basically the same shit over and over again. Yeah.
So we dumped a little bit on the existing thing, but I'm still optimistic on that this kind of state where we see it working gives a chance for people who actually have better ideas. Okay, now my VC believe that it's going to happen. Yeah. So when I come to them with a good idea that no one did, they will give me the money that before they would say, no, that's nothing about AI 10 years ago. Now people say, okay, AI, give it to me. So and I think that the second generation would actually do good things. They're going to do small language models that are only the things you need with what you called first guardrails. I think it's just constraints. Like they're gonna, I think that there is something good that you can do, which is now, again, I'm a hammer in this case looking at nails, but that's what the brain does. You take a baby, you show them a bunch of things, they learn quickly, overnight they prune, so their brain has it like every night they do the same thing, they prune the information that's not needed. Like you don't need to remember every step you made, just remember that you walked from here to Macy's and you compress the entire walk into one memory. I walked, and you do that fast, you do it overnight and so on, and then you get to, I think, a world where I am excited about, which is instead of GPT 3, 4, and 5 emerging every 7 months and only, it's going to be overnight.
Yeah, that's right.
Every night you're going to have a new, you learn what happened yesterday, so you could ask your chatbot questions about 2 hours ago. Who should I vote
for?
There's
a chatbot doing that now, which is the one Twitter made.
Yeah, the Grok, right?
Called Grok, yeah.
So that's on Twitter. This learns Twitter.
It's trained on Twitter data, but it's constantly growing.
So that's what I'm, basically, Google knows when I create a new website, 2 hours later, Google knows about it. Yeah. Because they keep crawling the internet all the time. OpenAI crawls the internet every 6 months. Yeah. So they don't know about events that are happening 2 days ago. Twitter.
They have some hack for that now, I think. But
we'll do it. And I think that in the end, you want something that you add new knowledge. The immediate computer says, this is actually real knowledge. It's not like one more version of a question that's useful. I'm going to include it and I'm going to tell the world about it. And I think that I think would be useful because you can actually get advice real time. That's what we're trying to do right now with all kinds of leaders making decisions. We say it's useful for Biden to get AI helping him only if the AI knows about yesterday, not just like about.
This is one of the things that I think is lost on a lot of people, but the ability for a computer to help you out on anything is directly proportional to how much it knows about you and how you think and what you know already and how much you care about different things. I mean, it needs to know everything. It needs to know every conversation I've ever had, every email, every tweet, every text message, everything. It needs all that in order to be able to do a better job of helping me. And I think that's where it obviously goes. And
one sentence of saying it, like all the AIs right now learn the world
Yeah.
and hope that you fit somewhere into the average of the world. And instead we say, let's build an AI that knows you
Yes.
and will give you whatever you need from the world.
Yes, exactly right. To summarize what's happening in AIs as we know them now, it's basically all just deep learning all the way down.
Yes.
So deep learning turned out to be the winning approach. Transformers turned out to be an efficient way to do deep learning. And we're doing deep learning for everything. And because it was proven to do English, now normal humans feel like they can understand AI or use AI in a way that only PhDs could do before. But fundamentally, we know deep learning is very limited and as a way of accomplishing stuff, but it's generally applicable. So that's why I can do words and images and movies and everything else. I had this experience where when my daughter was, I want to say like 3.
How old is she now?
She's 17 now. So 2 things happened at the same time. My daughter was like 3. She was speaking, and then she started to just like, maybe she was 4, I don't know, stutter a bit, which she had never done before. But she'd hit a word and she'd get like tuk, 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 tuk on it, and then she'd move on. Happened maybe a dozen times a day or something.
I have the opposite effect.
What's that?
I have the opposite thing.
Oh, you have the opposite thing.
I start speaking before the word is finished. I want to move to the next one.
Yeah, and then you don't have time to finish a word. Yeah, I can see that. So she would do that. It wasn't like hugely concerning, and we asked professionals about it, and they're like, don't worry about it. She'll probably grow out of it. And so we just waited, and she did grow out of it. And it was fine. At the same time, I had this buddy who was one of the smartest people I ever knew. He was a trial lawyer, and he was a trial lawyer whose job was to defend the last remaining company that had put asbestos in insulation like 50 years ago. There were thousands of companies that did that. They all were sued into oblivion. One of them decided, no, we're going to fight this. We didn't do it. We didn't do all the asbestos. We'll take care of the ones we did, but so they would get every lawsuit because they were the only ones left. So they had like 100 lawyers working for them whose job was to like defend them. And whenever those lawyers fucked it up and had been working on it for years and it was in court, they're about to lose, then they'd call my buddy. And I won't name him, I guess. I don't know if he wants to be named. So then he would show up in court and save the day. And he had a 25-year career, never lost a case. If there was like Olympics or if there was like a world record in the Guinness Book for trial lawyer, he would have it. This guy was amazing. And he was a voracious consumer of everything. Every day there'd be one-click shopping. He kept Amazon in business for years. Just books, movies, CDs, magazines, everything would show up. Every day, piles of this stuff would come in and he would just absorb it all. He's always doing like one of all those things. Anyway, amazing guy. And then has a stroke.
Yes.
And you can see on the images, like a quarter of his brain is just black, just gone. And he survived the stroke, but lost speech, lost reading, lost writing, lost the ability to understand people, had to relearn all those things. And if this happened to me, I would just give up and be like, fucking take me out back and shoot me. I've got nothing. This guy is like, oh, new challenge. Unlocked, new challenge, next level. He starts, first thing is he like learns to understand speech. So I'd come in, he knows me, he's got all his memories, but he doesn't have, and he even knows the words. They're in the brain, but he doesn't know how to map what he hears to the thing. So I show up and he's like, I have to say my name. I'm Pablos. He knows I'm Pablos. He knows who I am, but he can't, and visually he knows who I'm Pablos, but he doesn't know how to map the sound of the word Pablos to me. So he's like learning that, and he's learning to say Pablos. He would practice saying Pablos, and he'd be like, oh yeah, Pablos. So he's mapping the word in his head to the person, to the sound of the word, to how to say it, and all those things. And so he got through that remarkably quickly, could start to speak. He'd get stuck now and then, but within less than a year, it was hard to tell that he had a stroke. And then the next challenge was reading, and he took on reading, and he got through reading. And then the last one was writing. And so he goes through and learns to write. He's like, oh, well, as long as I'm learning to write again, I should just come up with a font that I like. And he invented his own handwriting style. Since the first time you learn it, you're just a kid, you're just trying to like make it happen, and you end up with what you end up with. But he's doing it at age 50 or whatever. He's like, oh, I'll come up with a writing style that I like. So he designs all the letters because he has to learn them anyways. And he practices all the letters and he learns to write. And then, so I go over to his house and he's like, hey, check this out. He takes the pencil. He's like, right hand, he's right-handed, puts in his left hand, and then writes, and it looks the same. And he's like, check this out. He writes upside down, and it looks the same. and he writes upside down and backwards. You can hold up to a mirror. He can do that with either hand. He didn't try those things. He just magically could do them. I'm not an actual neuroscientist, but I was just playing one for a day here, and I started to think, okay, maybe what's going on with my daughter is she's trying to learn to speak. Different parts of the brain are taking turns competing for the job of speaking. And eventually one wins out and you just use that for the rest of your life.
Perfect.
And usually it's the same part of the brain because, I don't know, we're evolved and one is usually the best. And occasionally you get some fringe wacko like Picasso or something ends up with it swapped. And then what's happening with my buddy is like, okay, he had the stroke. So now the part of the brain that's good for this language stuff is gone. The other parts can do it, like the Chat GPT can tell you how to drive to work or make dinner, but it's not exactly going to get it right. It can do it. And that's what's happening is he's retraining to do speech, but with the part of the brain that was for drawing.
You're right.
And so what I think is maybe our brains, they have a better algorithm than deep learning, but they may be using one algorithm to do everything.
You basically, so we studied that a lot.
Okay.
This is like a new field in 2015 kind of emerges,
Okay.
but with some kind of evidence in 1940 for the first work, but it's getting a lot of like researchers right now because we can do it in a much more invasive way with patients and so on. So we can do it. But what you're saying is right in the sense that the brain has a lot of neurons, and the way neurons work is the same whether they're in the front of the brain, the back of the brain. There are some differences in neuron types, but for the most part, neurons are neurons.
Yeah.
So when we say, oh, I felt something, or I said something, or I thought, it's neurons firing. And the neurons don't know that they are feeling neurons, that they are speaking neurons. They just, when they fire, if you look inside the brain, it just hears speaking of neuron. And you learn that if it comes from this part, it must be that they're looking at the face, and this part they're saying a word and they're smelling something. But the neurons don't do it. And also we can start rewiring them. So there's a paper, 2018 roughly, fancy one, that took a ferret, strange animal, and just rewired it. They just connected this neuron to this neuron.
Oh.
And when they now play the sound of the ferret, this area in the front light lit up that wasn't supposed to because they now rewired it to the front.
It's like synesthesia.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
synesthesia is a manifestation of that in wiring happens automatically. They created synesthesia with the ferret in whatever way you want. Like you can touch the whiskers and it feels like it's a face. So now that we prove that we can do that, you can start doing it in various levels. So level 1 with humans is taking people who lost some sense and recovering it. So the classic one is cochlear implant. You become deaf because your ears don't work. So the brain still works, but the ears don't work. We can give you an implant that sits where the ears sit and does what the ear does, meaning it listens to pressures change in the air, and it feeds the signal into the nerve cells that go to the brain. The thing is, the way the cochlear implant works isn't the way the ear works perfectly. Like the mapping is not the same. So when people build it first, they said it's never going to work because we're now taking the signal and we're just blasting it into a different location. What's going to happen? Turns out the brain learns. So the brain is good for that. The brain kind of figures there's a new signal. For a while, I'm just going to listen to it and see what it does. But then I see that whenever I get this pulse, someone does something with their hand that looks like clapping. So I guess the pulse maps to the sound of clapping. So I'm going to elevate the weights and boom. Now, when this, I'm going to hear a clap. And with this, I'm going to hear someone scratching their back. And with this, I'm going to hear someone laughing. And you start quickly mapping. It takes about 8 months for the brain to relearn. And from then on, you just hear. And you don't even know that the brain now hears from a different set of neurons and so on. It's the same. We now have the same thing with retinal implants. Take people who lost their sight. You replace their eyes, the retina, with a camera. The camera takes photon on one side, feeds it into the nerves that go to the eye. It's not the same signal, but the part of the brain that sees figures it out, and you give sight to the blind. That's what Jesus did. Got a love for that.
He hacked the optic nerve. The brain is clearly not a CPU; it's an FPGA.
Yeah, and once I think once we did it for clinical purposes, we realized that everything is for grabs. You can take. So up to now, we took sensors you had, and we give them back to you because you lost them. But we can easily take the whiskers of a cat and feed them into the brain of a human. And now we put whiskers, we plug them into your brain, we feed them into the eyes. And if I touch Pablo's whiskers, you're actually gonna feel something. And this isn't done with humans, but it's done with animals all the time. We can plug different sensors into the brains of animals, and you make monkeys see more colors and their eyes offer automatically. We make cats basically see in the back because of the eyes in the back kind of feed into them. So you can play with that, and nature becomes like a plug and play device. You can kind of plug sensors into the brain. And I think that what's speaking to your friends, that's naturally the state of the brain over our evolution in lifetime. So when your daughter was born, kind of age 0 to 5, the brain is totally plastic. Like all neurons are basically up for grabs. There are a few that kind of specialize, but everything is for grabs. And we train kids the same way, so the neurons specialize the same way. As you get older, the neurons start to freeze their kind of function, and they don't change as much. By age 17, most of your brain is fixed. And this means that if you have a stroke at age 2, you're going to walk the day after. Your brain's going to say, okay, this neuron's no longer working, like it's bypassed and so on. If you have a stroke at age 50, you're going to have to spend 6 months learning new thing. And when you learn new things, the brain is basically up for grabs. So you can learn upside down writing, learning to speak Swedish, whatever kind of you want. You have neurons and they're waiting for signal, and you can, whatever you feed there is going to work. When you're a baby, people teach you only the thing that we think you need. So no one teaches a baby to write upside down. But if you started teaching your newborn kid to write upside down, they're going to be expert. If you teach a kid to ride bicycles the opposite way, they're going to. So we can do that. The older we get, less it is. But now there are studies, and that's 2023 type of thing. We now have, in movies, you have this moment is you kind of clear and you kind of reset the heart.
Yeah.
We know how to do clear for the brain to essentially take our brain and essentially reset it, which makes neurons that are already fixed start. Now, if you do it to a person in his 50s, it's risky. Kind of, you might lose your emotions, you might forget how to work and so on. So we don't do it. But
we know how to initialize them.
Exactly. So this make it basically be more plastic.
Do you think maybe this is what's going on with some of the psychedelics people are taking?
So it's not recommended just to kind of not write at home. Because when you reset, you lose whatever you did.
You control what you're resetting. Exactly. You might be resetting the wrong thing.
You used to see, and now you get blind by kind of one. But at the same time, I think that's what it is. And I think that what psychedelics do more often is they don't lose the function. They just connect things that weren't connected. So you suddenly have connection between your visual area to your smell area, and suddenly you smell more things that you didn't smell before, you see more things and so on. But this connection also decays over time, so it's not really harmful. Like you go back, but it is good that the brain suddenly has more traffic. It allows you to come up with new ideas and have less boundaries. So it's not surprising that the Beatles come up with good songs on LSD. The world is richer in their mind, and as long as they can retain some of the ideas that they had on LSD, outside of it, they can actually turn them into actions, and then it works.
One of the big problems holding back robotics has been that robots don't have fingertips that can feel things. And in fact, they have what we call end effectors, which is basically like what would happen if you stuck gummy bears on the ends of your fingers or something, and just tried to operate. And the most interesting thing I've seen to solve this was this team, I think at UC Berkeley, they took a CMOS sensor, like a camera, just normal, like camera from your phone. They put it in like a gummy finger with a series of LEDs. And then what would happen, a gummy fingertip, and then what would happen is they train the thing just using vision. They train what happens when they flash the LEDs, because they can sense that with the camera. And then whenever there's any deflection on the gummy fingertip, it causes diffraction in the light from the LEDs that they can pick up with the camera. And so just by flashing these and doing a bunch of, different poking and prodding, they can train this thing to feel, but it's using vision to feel. And it's like very analogous. What I think is happening here is, and this is kind of what we're finding with deep learning, is we can bastardize it to do anything. And this is and you can kind of see that with Tesla saying that they can just use cameras and deep learning and get rid of everything else.
It's not surprising. So in a way, if you think what is feeling, if you look at the skin, it's usually two things. It's pressure and temperature. That's all that every cell in your skin, that's all it does. It kind of measures how much pressure it is and what temperature it is. Those are sensors that we know how to build, and we can also replace, we know photoelectric effect, we can replace temperature with light. We can, to an extent, mimic the way pressure works with. So the body is very efficient. It does it in a fraction of a second. You can feel if like a little dust particles on you, which we need to get better in many ways, because it's expensive right now to do it in sensors. But it's not surprising. Like, to me, the race between evolution biology and evolution robotics is getting to the point where we can easily replace parts. Like, we can say, okay, like this, you have a patch, you got burned here, we'll give you the CMOS version. And so in that sense, I've never seen it, but it's not surprising to me. That should work.
When I try to extrapolate what I see happening with things like Neuralink, which are trying to put electrodes in the brain and sense those neurons. I read a paper, I think it was last year or something, where they figured out that neurons not only detect a signal, they can detect the direction of the signal. And I started to realize, our electrodes can't tell that. They can just detect a signal. So it just seems like there's this possibly intractable problem of like, how do you sense all the activity in the brain? Like, even if you could put tens of thousands of electrodes in the brain, which, invasively, you still would, at least at this point, maybe detect a signal, but you wouldn't detect the direction. Like with everything, we always want better, higher resolution data. And with the brain, it seems like, especially like with EEGs and stuff, electrodes on the outside of the skull, it's like you're just getting this very low grade signal. And we might be able to error correct for some of this or whatever, but like, I don't understand why people think they're going to be able to just read your thoughts. Like, I can see if you like read a thought we've seen before and you see it again, and I understand that, or you might, if like it's a thought that everybody has, like I'm hungry, maybe you could start to identify that with some machine learning, but you're not going to read my original thoughts. And
so
I'll
defend Neuralink.
Yeah.
So first of all, to the audience, so Neuralink is the commercial version of my research.
Okay, cool.
So the audience should know, like so my research, if I had to summarize it in like one paragraph, is putting implants in people's brains, reading and writing thoughts. That's what we do for the last 15 years.
Yeah. So disabuse me of my...
So we're working with patients.
Yeah.
Patients come, they have a problem with the brain. The problem requires brain surgery to fix. We put neural implant inside. We keep the chip inside their head until we figure out what's the problem, and then we fix the problem. But in the course of figuring it out, we have a neural implant inside the human brain for 2 weeks that sends a signal from the inside, and we use that to study the brain and predict what it is. So here's the answer to what generally will happen, and then to the specific one. Generally, what you said about the fact that you can detect some thoughts, but not the real ones, most of our thoughts are not the real ones. So if I put a chip in your brain and I detect just patterns that you thought before, that's most of what people think. If you look at your day, anyone can do it right now. Think about the last day. How much time did you sit there and invent new ideas versus just like, I'm hungry, I should type this email. Most of our thoughts, and we sleep at the start of the day, which is really just really. So if we can just do that, we get a lot of thoughts. And now the 10% that we care about is me. The ones that are, hey, that's not really just I'm hungry and I'm going to say, give me food, but I'm actually, so that's the holy grail. Everyone is looking at that. So what kind of is there? Turns out that to everyone's surprise, we have a hard time reading those, but we have an easier time influencing those. So I can learn a lot of the patterns that make you.
Yeah.
That's the 90% we call it. And I still don't know the 10%, but I can do things to your brain that will gear the 10% to more things that I understand.
You can make the last 10% that's unique into lowest common denominator thoughts
for you, but based on you. So it's still going to be you, but I'm gonna. So I'll give you an intuition that will make sense. In theory, you can go to a restaurant and say, "I want something," but most restaurants give you a menu and they constrain you already to, and then you choose, and you still feel, yeah, I chose and it reflects me. But really, they put a menu, and this is true for Walmart. You go there and you can say, "What I want is," you can invent a product, but really, the world gives you finite set. So brainwise can do the same thing. We can say, we know Pavlos. We can create a finite set of things for him to choose for. It's still going to be him. He would still feel 100% like it's unique to him because he chose. But really, we made our life easier because we constrained the number of options. And that's what we play. So if you're Picasso, you're screwed because Picasso's genius was that he had no boundaries and he really came up with everything. And we now make you can only paint 5 things. Choose which one. But for the most part, it feels to people, and even to Picasso, that there's enough kind of vast richness of things there that they still feel it's them. And it works. And the aim of Neuralink is mostly to help people that are kind of, that 90% of them is broken. So it will give a lot of people advantages. It will give some people less of a brain. Yeah. And as humanity as a whole, kind of up to go. So I'm not necessarily a fan. So I wouldn't tell you like, hey, go buy. Yeah. But now we understand what we're dealing with.
Okay, cool. So if we make an FPGA that is made of some kind of gates that approximate the performance of neurons or the attributes of neurons, then if we can do one, we can do like a data center of them. We could have these like strap-on neurons. And so that right now we have, I don't know how many layers, it's 3 layers of the brain that were evolved at different times or whatever. And that 4th or next layer, whatever it is, could be these external gate arrays that are strap-on neurons. And to strap them on, they would have to go through the optic nerve, I think, because it's the only high bandwidth interface to the brain. Even if you could do Neuralink, it would be so invasive to get to the...
So I'll ask you
am I wrong about that?
I'm going to tell you, so there are 3 challenges to having neural implants. So Neuralink wants neural implants in everyone's brain. We do it with patients. for this to become a mainstream thing, there are 3 barriers, and here they are. One is we need to know how devices speak to brains. Solved. This is what we do every day in my lab. We put neural implants in your brain. We teach them how to learn to solve. We can always do better. We can do fast, and we can do kind of learn to speak to all neurons and so on. But effectively, this was step 1. Check. Step 2, how to get inside the brain. This is what you asked me about. That's I'm going to tell you in a second where we are with that. But that's step 2. We need to get the device inside your brain.
Yeah.
Right now, the way Moran does it is he opens one.
Yeah.
You bring a neurosurgeon, drills a hole with a big machine, removes the skull, puts a device inside, close the skull. It sits there, the brain fights it, inflammation, it's bloody, risky. Do not write at home. That's option 1.
Yeah.
So that's kind of option 1 to get it. There are other options. So Elon Musk's Neuralink, they speak about doing this thing in a machine that's, they call it LASIK surgery. Like they try to commercialize this. It's like LASIK, it's nothing. Like it's just like a thing. So it's like a little stapler that they reduce in like one zap, it puts it, but it's still invasive. Yeah. They still drill a hole. There are other ways to do it, which is you can swallow a pill that penetrates the blood-brain barrier and goes to the optic nerve. You can inject it through the eye. Or there are many ways to get in the brain. There are companies that right now vie for who's going to be the one who gets inside the brain. But you've got to get inside. And optic nerve is not the only one, but it's a very good one because we know how it works.
And can you also, while you're on that topic, talk about like using light like open water is trying to do?
I'll tell you in a second about that. I'll just tell you what third one is going to go.
Okay.
Third one is regulation. Right now, we didn't agree as a society that we accept people with better brains or so that for the lawyers.
Yeah, we always know that.
So 1 and 3 kind of 1 is technical, 3 is legal.
Impossible.
And 2 is where a lot of the time is spent. So now there are various companies that try to find different ways to get something inside the brain. So 1 is Neuralink stapler. We drill a hole, small. Another one, optic nerve. There's tons of the Pfizer, Moderna, and all of those kind of the big pharma company. They say there must be a pill that we can get there somewhere. One or the other. There's viruses. With animals, it's viruses. There's the one that you mentioned, which is light. So the gist of it, if I had to explain it is that the last 20 years of neuroscience have moved to a lot of light as a conduit to get inside the brain.
Okay.
It starts with a German guy who has a patent that didn't really know what he was doing, but he realized that there's a type of algae that has a special kind of biological property, which is if you shine light in certain frequency, the pores of the algae open.
Okay.
That's it. That's what he discovered.
Okay.
And some guy at Stanford that is the guy who gets all the credit for basically bringing this entire field into life, realized that you can take the algae and extract the virus that make this phenomena, that pores open, install it in a virus that you can inject into, it started with rats, but now it's monkeys and humans. And this virus can also be given the instructions to land in a specific neuron in the brain.
Wow.
So you can
specific neuron?
To the level of either a neuron or a cluster of neurons, but like to a location. Like we can definitely say this virus now goes to the language area and sits
how would you, sorry, I don't understand how you can target a virus to a specific.
So I told you earlier that all neurons are the same, but I was lying. They're not all the same. We know what makes for pyramidal cells, we know enough about the DNA of neurons to say these neurons belong to language area.
So was the Allen Brain Project helpful in figuring that out?
The Allen Brain Project helped us take rats, they did it all with rats, and map each neuron to its proteins and biology so that now someone else can come and say, I want to get to this neuron.
Wow.
And I can take the algae property, take this neuron property, mix them together, put a virus, and the virus will go and land there. And when it lands there, it means that now you have a neuron that if you shine a light in a certain frequency, it opens a pores and it activates this neuron. Wow. So what this guy, his name is Carl Deiserot, did, he took rats and he put the virus on the neurons that control wanting to move left. Okay, so the rat moves in a maze, and then you turn blue light, the rat moves left. And then you turn a different one that you put on the move right, and eventually you have like a joystick, and you can just kind of puppeteer a rat, and you can move it in the maze. So you can move it by making it want to go left, right. He has another experiment where he makes them go to sleep. So you press the button, they fall asleep.
Wow.
Releases, they wake up. Press the button.
That for my girlfriend.
Exactly. That's for like the babies, the number one thing. Like the baby is crying, press the button, they fall asleep. And then they now started, once you realize that it works, you just, now it's a game. Let's find a neuron, let's find what it does, let's create the virus for it and turn it on and off and make it do things. And this opened up, to your question before, kind of entire field of research that says, let's find in every animal the neurons that control some phenomena, see if we can figure out what's unique to their kind of DNA, create a virus for them. The only bad thing about it is that it's forever. So there's no way to take it out. So we attach, so it's there, and anyone can operate it. you walk in the street and someone turned the light and you want to buy a Coca-Cola. And someone, so in a way, like you don't
So
control
now
it.
we need a tinfoil hat to keep our
Exactly.
our brains.
So that's why I think with humans, there are only, I know of one, but probably a handful of cases where you give humans this virus. I think
Oh.
they do it with like something with like the eye. So there's some people who are basically not able to see, like color blindness, basically that you don't see some colors. We can give you this photoreception, it's called, this particular.
But there's a group of patients who have a electrode implant for like Parkinson's amelioration. Could we do the same approach?
So these
for
guys are
them?
doing what I do. So the Parkinson's patient, all of us are doing like the old school.
Yeah.
You open the brain,
Yeah.
you put neural implants inside. So the cool thing about this virus is the light penetrates the skull, so you
Yeah.
can turn the light. So you give a virus, you give to the hand,
Yeah.
virus to the place, and then shine light on the outside. It works. Parkinson patient, deep brain stimulation
Yeah.
patient, epilepsy patient, all of those, they go to me.
Yeah.
What we do is we drill a hole.
Yeah.
So what we do is the invasive version, which is still
But do you think it's possible to replace what you're doing with this algae thing?
So for now, it's not on the menu really because because it's a permanent thing.
Oh, because it's permanent and
yeah.
that's considered taboo.
Exactly. So people don't go there to put viruses in
I see,
people.
I
That's
see.
Unless.
Wow, that is so fascinating.
And I should say to defend our field, and it sounds very dramatic, the invasive thing, but it's not.
Yeah.
So if the world decides, that's option 3, if the world decide categorically, regulatory, politically, that they're okay with that, we can find a way, and that's what Elon Musk's company is all about, to actually put a neural implant in your brain in an invasive way. So we still drill a hole and put it inside, but in such a fast, not risky way that it could be mainstream. And the analogy that he uses, that I'm going to steal from him, is breast implants. So go back to 1960s. The first woman who said, I want to put implants in my breast, not because I had cancer, but because I wanted aesthetically, was on the cover of Time as a crazy woman who now, and now, 78 years, like I think every 12-year-old girl, kind of, one out of 3, I think, asks for her 16th birthday to get breast implants. So it became mainstream and it's no longer risky. And it's kind of, you do it $10,000 and you can do it tomorrow. Like you don't have to get like permission from anything. Like Elon Musk's gamble is that 6 years from now, or maybe even less, that's going to be the case for neural implants. You go and you say, oh, the new iPhone implant is out. I want version 13. You got it.
Wow. Okay, cool. That's amazing. I know that it's frustrating to be quizzed about all this boring shit, but what are you working on now?
So I'll give you sexy stuff and more. So we have the sexy work.
It doesn't have to be sexy.
We have so I think as a scientist, I ride the wave of AI. We have one work on AI.
Okay.
As a neuroscientist, I have work on dreams. So the thing I care about the most right now is dreams. By far, it's the topic that I care about the most. It's uncharted territory for a lot of labs. You need to have a lot of background to go there, and I'm there already. And the kind of the bottom line here is that we want to be able to read your dreams and write dreams in your brain. That's what we want to try to do. If you have a neural implant in someone's brain, it's not too hard to use the neural implant to basically monitor thoughts when the person is asleep, and by doing that, actually extract dreams. So that's not surprising, but it requires brain surgery.
As long as I'm dreaming the usual boring shit that everybody
Which
dreams.
is the case most. So not even so it could be repeat, but it could also be like some of your neurons in your brain code for generic concept like a human or a person. So I might not know that you're seeing your sister, but I will say that you're seeing a human and that you're seeing an object, and I can extract, even if not the visual one-to-one of, okay, he's seeing himself with his sister going to a shop and buying this thing. Let's say you are the person that you're familiar with, that you feel intimate with, and you went to a store that you've been to before, and that's also interesting. So even if I don't have everything that you did before, I just know concepts, I can still pick it up. That's version 1. And version 2, the more exciting one, is you go to sleep and you say, I would love to have a dream where I'm going to Mars with my girlfriend, and I want the dream to be directed by Spielberg, and I want to smell this thing, and I want to be the hero, and we give it to you. And that's the next step.
Let me try another half-baked theory on you.
Sure.
That I made up. What I see more and more is just another analogy with computers is what humans are, these like story-powered creatures, right? So we make these stories, we accumulate them, they drive our decision-making. When I look at my daughter would come home from school, line up her like stuffed animals and her dolls in little rows. She would stand in front and teach them, which mostly would seem to be like her scolding them for speaking out of line and the things that, so this is a model she created in her head of the classroom. And what's happening is all of us are creating a model in our head of the world. You can close your eyes, you can picture being in your bed. Where's your bedroom door? What's on the outside of that door? Like you have a model in your head that you've created over your life that's different from mine, but we each have one. And when we talk about computers, what we're doing long before LLMs, Google Maps is a model of the world. And what happens is when you have a model, then you get to run simulations. So in Google Maps, you say where, I want to go to work, and it shows you a blue line, and it shows you like, this is your possible futures. You get a blue line, that's the one it thinks is the best, but then there's some gray lines for other ones. If you want to stop at an ATM or get a burrito or whatever, you have possible futures to choose from. And those are simulations. Mm-hmm. And so in AI, long before LLMs, what we were doing is making these models, running simulations thousands of times in software to figure out what's optimal and then do that in the real world. And I think what's happening in brains is we're creating this model. Each of us is creating a model in our head. And what I think the dreams are is the simulations. The dreams is your brain running simulations to figure out what's optimal, and even daydreams, and even like the cycles you get into where it's, oh man, I was in that conversation, I wish I'd have thought to say this. That's running simulations. And I think the analogy holds pretty tightly. And I think what we're doing now is we're at the point where finally the rest of the world is convinced that the computer models are useful. So they're finally funding them and scaling them, and we're getting to make models for everything. But, and again, not just the PhDs who can do it. So we're getting to a point where we're aiming it at everything. But I wonder, in your research, you're trying to understand this stuff in a more educated way than I am. I'm making shit up.
I'll tell you, I'll give you guesses. First of all, you and I agree on what dreams are for.
Okay.
A way for the VR, it's a way for the brain to simulate future when you're asleep in a very safe way. It feels real while it lasts. You don't really know it's a dream. So you filter it through your emotions and your decision making. You basically do what would you do when the bear comes. Yeah. You see how it works out.
Yeah, and you shut off the arms and legs. That's why you're doing it when you're sleeping.
You forget most of it when you wake up, other than the residues that left, which is I have the learning. It's now in my neuron, and I can, if tomorrow I encounter a bear, I have this. But I should say, so this, I believe that, and you believe that, and I spent a career trying to build. That's one of 7 theories to what dreams are for, and there are others. So I can give you 1 or 2 just to. But so that's the one that I hold, and I spent a lot of time proving it and creating all kinds of simulation and showing that if I take a person who slept and I created a dream for them, and then in the real world, when they wake up, I have them confront this thing, they actually do better than if I didn't make it as a dream. So I show in many ways that I can create simulations in your dream, and they're useful when you wake up. Okay. And I'm not the only one. There are many people who, not many, but whoever among the people who study dreams, there are 7 camps because there are 7 theories. All the people in my camp found different ways to suggest that this is the reason for dreams. I'll give you alternatives just so you know. There are others. So there's one group at Stanford that says dreams mean nothing. They don't even have any kind of substance. All they are is a way for the part of the brain that controls vision to not be dormant. So because the eyes are shut down and no input comes, the fear is that part of the brain are going to take over. So the brain basically says, if part of the brain doesn't get any inputs, then I'm
reserving real estate.
So exactly. So it says we need to make sure that over the night, this part still is active, so other parts won't think, okay, it's like, let's say, Occupy. So it creates whatever.
That's cute.
So that's a theory. And they also have evidence. They basically show that if you try to inject random noise there, the brain still is okay with that, because all it cares about is to have the neurons fire. Okay. That's another camp with a lot of evidence for that. There's a third camp that focuses on what's the, I would say, kind of ability of dreams to control memories. So it shows, I teach you something when you're awake. Yeah. I activate this thing in your dream, and then I test you when you wake up afterwards about memory. And they can show that the things that are activated, you remember. Yeah. And if I had you remember 50 things of 100, and I only activated those 50, you will remember those 50 and you'll forget the other 50. So I can actually show that dreams have a play in not just simulating futures, but actually regenerating things that you. So there's another camp that says dreams are not really about the future, they're about actually the past, and just making sure that the past is central. It's basically the fragment of the hard drive, which kind of organizes it better. So there's other camps, and each camp has this thing. I'm with you. And my kind of strong belief is that dreams are a way for our brain to simulate futures and prepare for that.
So what's the state of the art in planting dreams in me? Like, can I learn Kung Fu in my sleep?
No. So unfortunately, so the hallmark everyone wants to is to learn new things, to teach new things or learn new skills. Yeah. Zero. Okay. Zero a success there. Okay. The only thing we can do, which is this third group, we can have you learn something when you're awake, and we make your brain rehearse that and practice that and get better at that. So if you go to the golf course and you learn to golf when you're awake, and you somehow got some moves, we can make you in your sleep rehearse that hundreds of times. So when you wake up in the morning, you will be perfect on those moves. But the perfect is whatever level you got to when you're awake, we can make it cemented. but we can't get you better.
Oh.
So that's a type of learning. We kind of
Yeah,
rehearse.
but you're reinforcing
Yeah.
what I learned.
Yeah. You brought it in, we just
Yeah.
cement it. That's version 1. Everyone wanted version 2. You go to sleep and you wake up speaking Spanish. This,
Yeah.
we made zero success in.
Got it. Interesting. I felt like I was able to, this is probably not the same thing, but like I could memorize things by recording them and playing them while I sleep.
So there is a work on that. So,
Yeah.
so the farthest we get on basically doing things is actually the almost opposite of that.
Oh.
We can make you remove things,
Oh.
but we can also, we can actually amplify things. So here's what I mean by that. We can change things
Mhm.
behaviorally, but the trick is that we have to target the right window. So it
Oh.
doesn't work. If I just
It's
go to sleep and I press,
part of sleep.
Exactly.
Or some, yeah.
if I press,
I would just be all night while I was
then
sleeping.
it,
Yeah.
if the brain learns that, it will be just because it hits the right moment. But what the guys who work on it do is they basically take the classic one. They take smokers, take people who smoke all their lives, and they say, "You want to quit? Come to sleep in our lab." And the person comes and they go to sleep. And all they think happened was that they slept for a couple of hours in the lab. But what really happens is that the lab technicians looked at your brain when you're sleeping, and they waited for your brain to get to the specific
Yeah.
window where it's essentially listening to the outside world and rethinking behaviors.
Mhm.
And then from the outside world, you inject the experience of smoking. They do it by spraying the smell of nicotine into the person's nose, and immediately after, spraying the smell of rotten eggs, which is a known smell
Oh.
to scientists that has this beautiful effect that it makes the brain think that something bad is happening,
Oh.
but not wake you up.
Oh.
So it's aversive response to nicotine. So basically what happens is that the neurons say, okay, smoking bad in the right window of time. I guess let's rewire the love for smoking to it's a bad thing. It only works if you do it in the right window of time, and then you stop and you do it multiple times overnight in the times where the window is
Yeah.
open for that.
Yeah.
And then the person wakes up after a couple of hours of sleep and they suddenly say, you know what, I don't feel like smoking anymore. And they have no idea that you were part of this intervention.
Yeah. Well, this audit seems like something that could have been done as a almost consumer product by now
Mhm.
with Apple Watches, figuring out what sleep mode you're in. And
I was approached in the last, so since we neuroscientists have
Yeah.
did it, I was approached, must be 2018, by dozens of companies
Yeah.
who want to commercialize it.
Yeah.
At some point, they all decay. So if there's someone in the audience
Yeah.
who is, and I'll tell you why. So right now,
Yeah.
where the barriers are, first of all, I need to be in your bedroom,
Yeah.
or a machine needs to be in the bedroom.
or your Apple Watch needs to emit rotten eggs. No.
Exactly. And you have to have the chemicals ready, like to
Okay.
replenish. So that's
Okay.
not too hard, but you have to have something. And you have to have a device that knows specifically what brain state you're at, and you have to agree to that
Sure.
psychologically. People somehow between those three don't like it.
But what about, is it possible that maybe some things could be addressed this way with just audio? Get rid of the smells and just talk to me at that moment?
So yes, so the memory part is done with audio, but it requires still. So the guys who did it with the memory,
Yeah.
what they did is when you're awake,
Yeah.
they show you 100 pictures,
Okay.
and each picture appears on the screen in a certain location, accompanied by a sound. So if you see a picture of a cat, you hear, oh.
Yeah.
And if you see, I don't know, a train, you hear the sound of a train. So
Okay.
each picture is accompanied by a sound.
Yeah.
That's what you do when you're awake. And what's important is that you need to remember which location the pictures are. It's really hard. So if I tell you like 100 pictures,
Yeah.
which location they are,
Sure.
it's pretty hard. And then you go to sleep. When you go to sleep, they play the sounds
Mhm.
of 50 of the 100 pictures.
Okay.
So they basically reactivate using the sounds, the thought about the cat and the location where it is.
Okay.
So they activate the sounds and then only half of them, and then they wait for you to wake up. And then when you wake up, they have you do the same task. Like try to put,
Yeah.
what they see is that you remember nearly perfectly
Wow.
the 50 pictures that we made your brain rehearse again
Wow.
and again, and you forgot all the other 50. So
Wow.
this means that sound, as long as before you went to sleep, was paired with some memory, can become a stimulus.
Okay. A practical application of that could be
Golf
for
plus
like
sound.
if I took Duolingo,
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be learning these words, vocabulary, and then my Apple Watch figures out what part of the night time I'm in the mode to do my language practice and just starts playing those words.
Perfect.
That should be a fucking product.
The Apple Watch apparently is not yet good enough.
Oh, okay. But an
know the
Aura
window.
ring or something, it's got to be things.
Yeah, so
Even if I had to wear a Muse headband or something, like how?
So the balance between it has to be not cumbersome
Yeah.
and it has to be good is somehow, so it's a problem
Oh.
that when any person in the room right now listens to us and is a machine learning guy,
Yeah.
says, I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Somehow it's still cheaper, easier, faster to have a person do it. And I think part of the reason is that if so
Yeah.
far it's much easier to do it. If I learn Pablo says, I
Yeah.
have you sleep for 10 nights with
Yeah.
the, let's say, Muse. with the Muse.
Yeah.
I take your data, I train the machine learning on your brain,
Yeah.
and then now for the 11th night and onwards, you do it. And I think that so they try to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are not cooperative. Like they don't want to sleep 11 nights with it. So what we do is we do it in a sleep lab where we force you to come 11 nights and and that works. I think the market, and I guess no company figured out how to do it. It's possible, computer science, it's possible engineering, it's possible psychologically to kind of get people to sleep.
Yeah, but
and somehow
if you just take the human out, it'll all work fine.
Yes. It's
as with most.
I know, because I'm in the space, I know of maybe 10, 15 companies that emerged in the last 5 years trying to do that. And they all kind of wane at some point. They said we didn't get enough.
Didn't get far enough, wasn't. I get it. I mean, it's hard.
Strange. It should work. Like mechanically it should work, but it doesn't.
Yeah, we'll have to think of a high value app. I mean, language learning, you would think people are obsessed enough with that. Chess players, poker players, memorizing stuff.
Smokers who want to quit.
Smokers who want to quit. There aren't any left, are there? Except maybe in Germany, but they don't want to quit. I don't know.
So we're doing an experiment right now that's the opposite. So once we figured out that you can actually make a person quit smoking, we're trying to enhance behavior. So we basically have people come to the lab. We do 2 experiments. One you're going to like, one you're going to not care about. The one that you won't care about is try to make people eat healthy. So we basically have them go to sleep. And during the kind of break where your brain is listening, we spray the smell of salad and positively,
smell of salad,
like salad and positively, and chocolate and vanilla negatively, and then you wake up and we give you a buffet. So you can choose whatever you want, and we can make people gravitate towards, not really perfect, towards eating healthy rather than choosing the chocolates.
Interesting.
So that's an application. If you're trying to diet and you constantly snack, we can give you a 2-hour nap that makes you want to do more of the healthy. And the cool thing, and it's trying so far not working, but that's I think going to work at some point, and a cool outcome is trying to, when you sleep, we inject ideas into your brain that when you wake up, we tell you, okay, you need to get the results. You need to create a password. Choose whatever password you want. And we try to control in your sleep which password you will choose. So we basically say, choose a letter in the beginning, then a number, then a capital one, and then we kind of whisper that neurologically into your brain, and then you pick a password without anyone, like without anything. People somehow pick the password that we injected, and then we know the password. So they picked it themselves. No one knows it, but we actually injected it in their sleep.
I think the problem with that is you're not doing it the way people choose a password. They don't choose one character at a time. They choose a word and then they try to fuck it up with alternative characters.
So I told this is why it doesn't work. So you're right. That's why you fail. But we can. So some website force you. They say you've got to start with a. So if we create the conditions that kind of constrain you, then we can predict what you're going to choose. But you're right. It's like we constrain you also.
Yeah. Interesting.
Baby steps.
Yeah. Wow.
That's cool. If we can, that's what magicians do, right? Like magicians basically come to you and they say, think of a number, it's 5. If you can think of a number and I say it, you'll be amazed. The fact that I actually put this number in your brain yesterday, you don't know about. And in that sense, you'll be amazed no matter what. But I would know that it was me putting it there and me extracting it afterwards. And you were just like a memory bank for a few hours of this number that I set and extracted afterwards. Neuroscience. You didn't ask me about the nuclear weapons, but who cares?
We can talk about that.
Yes.
Because what happened with the film?
Working on it. So I'm not allowed to tell you who, but we got a really big, because I'm going to tell you, but not when you record. We got a big shot production house with big director and so on to take it. And they took it away from so for the audience kind of understanding, I've been studying nuclear decision making for the last 3 years.
Nuclear decision making.
Or the big decisions, and we apply it to nuclear. How do you make critical decisions that will change the world? And one of the biggest one is how to choose whether or not to launch nuclear weapons, and what's the thinking that goes into it, and how to prepare for it. That's the research process. It's so interesting as a research process now because the world is building towards nuclear wars, and because AI is compared to nuclear wars. There's a lot of nuclear just comes in other conversations that the world cares about it enough for me to say maybe we should make it salient. And that's, in my mind, go to Hollywood. Kind of when I think let's make something salient, I think let's find someone in Hollywood who's going to make it into a movie or a TV series. So I reached out to people there and I said, make it into a TV series. And they started to do that. That's that. What happened in the process is that they saw a different story than the one I see. So my story is very simple. The brain is terrible at making big decisions. We can make it better. But right now, the people who are tasked with this thing aren't trying. So someone's going to nuke another country just because they had a bad day, and nothing we can do about it because we created a system that doesn't work with our brain. That's my story. Hollywood story is there's 2 presidents right now that are both in their early 80s or late 70s, and is an old person able to do that? And one question is nuclear weapons something that we should use if to have them? And what does Putin think? And North Korea and China, it became a story that is a lot bigger than politics. So it's still interesting. I'm buying into this and interesting, but it's very different than the one I had, which was about kind of behavioral economics, neuroscience, and decisions.
I think that particular story of like, how is decision-making done? In my mind, this is one of the things that should radically improve over the rest of our lives here, because the computers are going to get so good with those models at showing us our possible futures, letting us choose the one we want.
Right.
And that'll happen in businesses first, and in a century it'll happen with governments. But the future of humanity is really looking good because of that, if nothing else. And I'm really excited about that. But in the meantime, we have this adolescence that we're in where we have to rely on the world leaders not having a bad day.
Do you know what Fermi paradox is? You know this term?
Fermi paradox.
Yeah. So to summarize it, it's Fermi, Enrique Fermi, he was the guy who had this thought. And basically he calculated this. It's a very famous equation. I forget who had the equation, but basically he said, how come we don't see aliens? That's the question he said. He said, I can do the numbers. And I become very conservative. And I said, let's say 1 in a trillion planets has water. And 1 in a trillion planets of those is within reach. And 1 is trillion of those has the kind of conditions that keep the water in not freezing. Like you become very conservative. Still, with so many planets around us, there should be 10, like within an hour's ride from.
Well, maybe not more than an hour, but
like you just go to the Hudson River and you find the planet. That's how it is. And he said that, and still we don't find any. So he said, what's the answer? How come it doesn't work? And his answer, this is a paradox that came sometime in the season. His answer was, it's very easy. They destroy themselves. And he said every civilization that becomes intelligent, in his mind, he said something like 4,000 years, but he takes about 4,000 years civilization having the will to eat, creating the weapons that they use to destroy itself. And then there probably existed many planets around us that had life and smart civilization. They just invented weapons and something that killed themselves, and that's it. And we're in the same kind of trajectory. And by the year 2100, we're going to be extinct. And then someone's going to ask on Jupiter, how come we don't see anyone? And it's going to be that. That's his answer. So that kind of narrative is now popular in Hollywood, but also in kind of the circles I spend time in, which is kind of what's the barrier from this happening? And the barrier is brain. So it's always, in my mind, again, I'm a hammer, so everything, but it's the brain. Like our brain is really not good in imagining things that are either far in the future, will happen to other people that we can't see, or very small or very big. So people have a hard time envisioning things. If I ask you about what's going to happen in 200 years, you say it's now, but we call it 2200. You don't really imagine totally different thing. If I ask you, what does it, even you said something about you, if I think you said earlier that if you learn that you had a stroke, you're just going to say end it. And so we work with patients with whom we can talk to when they're okay about what will happen if they're not okay. So you come to me and you say, I'm okay now, I'm perfectly fine and clear. So let's make it's called a advanced care planning. Let's make a kind of a chart. What do we do with you if you have a stroke? And you might say right now, shoot me. Like I'm done. Like I don't want to, I have a friend who said like, do not hesitate if I'm not funny anymore. If my jokes don't land, so that's it. Pull the plug. So he makes this thing right now. And then comes the day and he's no longer funny. And so you write here that when you're not funny, like there's a committee of 10 people that said, if you're really not funny, it's time to pull the plug. So no, I'm changing my mind. And in many ways, like it could be you, like it could be, and we have something called T1, T2. T1 is the moment you made a choice. T2 is the moment you are it right now. And you said in T1, I'll take whatever medicine you give me, just keep me alive. And then you're in excruciating pain in T2 and you say, kill me. Like I can't do this pain. And say, no, but you wrote us not to, and right now the brain who tells us kill me is also under a lot of pain and so on. So we can't trust you anymore. There's a tension between the brain it's the same human container and it's the same brain in a way, but it's changed its kind of weights. And now you have a brain who tells you, shoot me down. Right now I'm not. And you have the same brain 2 weeks ago saying, never shoot me down. So you have this complex. So in that sense, I think about it in one brain and now extrapolate to society. Like we right now are trying to imagine how we should respond to a world in 200 years that maybe, I don't know, take whatever version you want. Too hot, too cold, too much population, too little, no sex, too much sex with robots, no children, whatever kind of dynamic you want. And I think the issue is that it's a brain problem. It's if we've solved how to work T1, T2 with one person, you say, okay, who do I listen to? when your brain tells you something that your brain told me yesterday, it's the same question. You can ask, what if a president says nuke Venezuela? And you say, he's not in his right faculties, but he's the president and we gave him the power to do it, but now we don't think that he can do it. What do we do?
Well, my version of that is that we just end up with competing AIs. My AI says we should nuke them. Your AI says we shouldn't. And we just end up in the same position we're in now, except with a lot more.
So I came to when we started this project, trying to help the government think of like ways to make better decisions, we right away said, let's use AI. And the logic there was AI is not perfect, but it's better than a human. So humans, if it's a scale of 0 to 100, humans are at 30% in how good they are in decision making. AI could be 31%, and that's enough for me. But the requirement from AI is to be 100%.
But see, if we could make a giant data center full of GPUs and we can spin them all the time doing random shit, and we just program the AI to say, do not nuke anybody. And so it looks just like the dreams in Stanford. We're just pretending like we're doing all this processing. At the end, it just says, don't nuke them yet.
So that's one of the jokes that Justin was basically, if I'm rational, I write a 3-line Python code that says, if whatever, do not nuke.
There you go.
But then, so communication is like, what if the AI that Putin has doesn't have this logic?
Right.
If and he knows that ours has this thing, do we play the game?
So my idea for that, which I tried to pitch you on once, I can't remember what you said, but it was probably bad timing, was I think we can solve this by making one exception to all the international treaties and everything, which is just that whoever, it should just be like a universal human truth that whoever pushes the red button first, like whoever launches the first nuclear warhead, should be the first one to go. So it's open season on that guy. So any world leader anywhere, if you think it's so important to launch a nuke, just know that's fine. You can be the first one to launch a nuke, but every person on Earth then gets a free ride to assassinate you.
Do you including
what's that?
Do you remember my answer? I give you an answer.
I don't remember your answer.
So imagine, let's take Putin is the guy, okay? Putin basically, the rule happens, Putin knows that if he presses the button, he nukes the US, but then the entire world is gonna, what happens to a guy who looks like Putin? So like, what if like, the guy just resembles him, how screwed is he? He just sits there in St. Petersburg and everyone says, oh, you look so much like Putin. And he says, oh,
well, you don't get freedom from prosecution for assassinating the wrong Putin. You only get it for assassinating the right Putin.
He is like really miserable. Like walks his life is like, I better hope that Putin doesn't do it. And
then being a Putin lookalike there's only a few jurisdictions where that's a positive.
So you joked about it. I'll give you a serious answer that plays like. So in the course of learning about that, we investigated a little bit the calculus that was made by Oppenheimer and his people during the Manhattan Project on trying the first bomb. So you've seen it if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, but it's documented really well in his writing and the books about him. They didn't know for sure that when they test a nuclear bomb the first time, it won't destroy the atmosphere and basically ruin Earth. And they still went with it. So it's in the movie, I think it's like shown for 5 minutes, but in the real world, this was a big thing that they were, because imagine that I'm telling you, you might, so this was 1945. The bombs we have right now are anywhere between 100 to 1,000 times bigger than the ones we had before. And some scientists who do the simulations of those bombs, especially one at Stanford that I spoke to for this movie, her name is Lynn Eden. She has the argument that we're not certain even more than before that if we bomb whatever country, it won't light up the atmosphere and destroy all of Earth. So in a way, it could be Putin saying, I really hate Alaskans, press the button, shooting a missile at Alaska, 1,000 times bigger than the one we used with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It first blasts Alaska, and then the mushroom cloud ignites the atmosphere, and it starts trickling down, and before long, Putin is dead in Moscow. It takes 2 hours later for him to die. And in that sense, you get what you wanted. Someone does it, knowing that he kills himself also.
It's not just that I get what I wanted. I think the point is,
stop people do it.
It becomes a deterrent, right? Because you know that, maybe you're 85 and you got a suicidal president of a country. I don't know. But that doesn't jive with the archetype. I just think it becomes a part of the calculus that decision maker has to know. It's like everybody who works for you can turn on you. Every Texan who has a gun can go hunt you down and not worry. The whole world has decided that they get.
So the guys from Manhattan Project did it actually, right? Think about them. They really didn't know anything. They chose to go. Even though someone told them you might kill yourself, they all did it. I think that the human brain,
Yeah.
and also we're basically asking the question like many of the leaders of the countries that have nuclear weapons right now the legacy would be like I killed a lot of Americans or a lot of Taiwanese, so it was worth it.
Yeah.
So I think it could still happen.
I know, but it's better than not having. I don't see any downside to having this. I was thinking, like, why don't we just have a global petition? We'll make a website. Everybody can sign it.
I'll take it. I'll sign.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. What's the problem with it other than...
And in the world that we're going to right now, that's the kind of... So I think that all the Pentagon people came down a little bit. Like in the beginning, they were no AI would be even on the conversation. Now they're totally into it, partially because they say, first of all, if it's 31% and we're 30, we're now willing to consider. And also it becomes obvious that AI is a weapon in this game, even if you don't put it in the decision-making side, on the kind of spoofing side. Like you might wake up one morning and you see on your radar that North Korea has launched a missile and all your signals are saying that and so on. And you say, okay, what do? I respond right away. Russia was actually the one.
War games all over again.
So war games was actually that. So I went to the Vatican a few months ago to speak about nuclear weapons with the kind of Pope's people and so on. And there was a woman that kind of spoke about war games and made me think. So war games was great.
War Games was the only good hacker movie ever made.
It's amazing. I agree on many levels, but it lives in a world where there are two nations, only two. So it says that it's a chess game. Like me, if I win, you lose and so on. And back then there were only two nations. It was like easy. Now there's 9.
Yeah,
and we don't have really
tic-tac-toe.
Exactly. We don't have a game, like we don't know. And they're in weird thing, like the missiles are pointing 2 years ago, Russia was our ally. Now it's the enemy, and China is like good with us. But if they attack Taiwan, they're the enemy. And North Korea is always the enemy, but they're also the enemy of this. So it becomes like it's too many equations to solve and changes a lot every step. It's a really complex chess game. And she said it, so the woman from the Vatican said it really nicely. She said, right now I'm terrified that I grew up in a world where war games was the lay of the land and there were two countries and we had to build all the theory to how we do that. And I now miss it because now that there's 9, I really said maybe in 10 years I'm going to say that I miss 9.
Yeah.
It's going to be Japanese and Australia and South Africa and Ukraine. It's going to be like a lot more. And we have allies with some of them that if like they attack NATO, we have to do something. And so it becomes for scientists, for a second, it becomes a really great kind of experiment to think about the world so I think that Oppenheimer should be jealous of me because he could only play a simple game and I get to play really fun chess game. So in that sense, I think that we have a lot more complex thing, and they took it only an inch because they had such a simpler world.
So going back to war games, one of the things the tech industry has really done wrong, we undervalued this storytelling thing for so long. And in one sense, I think it's forgivable in a way because in the long run, the technology always wins. But in the short run, we can really do a lot of damage because people get the wrong stories in their head. My view is that humans just got on the wrong track by conflating nuclear reactors with nuclear bombs back in the 70s and 80s. We outlawed the wrong one. We built the other one. And now we're living with the consequences. If we had built the nuclear reactors, you never would have heard of global warming. But instead, we're living with this conflation of lots of countries with nuclear missiles and not nearly enough countries with nuclear reactors. And we're not being honest with ourselves that we made the wrong choice, and we're living with that in a very serious way. I think we will correct this in the long run. When my kid's growing up in a world where she never heard of Chernobyl other than it was a Netflix series she didn't want to watch. And those kids will grow up and be like, fuck you, Dad, nuclear reactors are cool, and they'll build them. And so that part is great. I don't know if they will also be like, fuck you, Dad, we're getting rid of those missiles. Certainly not globally. So the point being, we've sort of woken up a little bit. Technologists have started to get better at storytelling, if only as a way to raise money. But now they are also getting a little more proactive, and there's a little bit of cross-pollination with Hollywood. The cross-pollination so far has been like Hollywood taking every new technology and turning it into like the evil boogeyman for their new movie, which I find infuriating. But I know that you've been trying, and more successfully than me apparently, all my attempts to try and make Hollywood do a more legitimate job of portraying hacking or science have been a complete failure. But I know you've been trying, and I'm wondering what is the potential there. We know, and this might go back to just the neuroscience. Humans are wired for the scary stories. They sell better. You can't, nobody wants to buy a movie with a Disney ending anymore. So how do we fix this, and how do we get past the glut of dystopian bullshit and
see your point.
sell some positive practical visions of technology.
So first of all, to go back to the beginning, if I were to say what the human brain is good at, it's storytelling, conveying ideas, and working in teams.
Okay.
That's what made humans superpowers.
Okay.
We can invent complex ideas like unicorns, don't exist, but I can share them with you and you see the same thing I do. Humans are good. That's the two things that the advanced frontal lobe gave us, and it made us kind of take off. So now everything should be used based on that. And I think Hollywood is amazing in taking that and making it into a money-making device. I did my PhD in Los Angeles, so I was close to the epicenter.
Okay.
And immediately recognized that there's a power there and also got money from that. So I was at Caltech. Caltech is a tiny university.
Yeah.
There's one road that is the center of Caltech. I one day walked on this road and there was a bulletin board, old school, with note on it. And there was a note that was from a Hollywood production filming a TV series and saying, we need scientists. You get $200 to read the script and put science inside. So there's doctors, and it's like, I got the script and it says something like, injects cc's of, and I just like 200 cc's of benzodiazepine. Yeah. That was my job. And I just got the script, ready to put this thing, and then that's how I made a little bit of money.
Okay.
But it got me also to see how they think of stories. I started to go to the writer's room and so on. And I also started to see how Hollywood works behind the scenes. I went to the filming of some of those series that I wrote the science in, and it wasn't in the film. And I got the director and I said, like, hey, what about the entire scene that I put here about the doctor actually injecting this thing? And said, oh, we took it out. And say, so why did you have me spend all this time writing it? So we can put in the titles, a science consultant.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's it.
Well, I got the credit.
Exactly.
I got the credit, but nothing I did made it into the films.
But I'll flip that in two ways. First of all, I'm going to say, I think that many of the ideas that we investigate in the lab right now, that my students are thinking about, they came from Hollywood. So Hollywood is doing a good job in imagine. They spend time and they get rewarded for imagining things. And then someone might say, hey, why not? There's a saying that I love that says the difference between science fiction and science is timing.
Yeah.
So my students, they watched Star Trek and they saw things happening there that
but Star Trek's the last example.
So it's the best example because there's a lot of things, but there are some kind of Mr. Robot, a show about hackers, spoke about collapses of banks because someone recorded this. I think is a potential dystopian outcome that could be done. Like I'm not talking about
collapse of banks is not dystopian. That would be good.
But no, hackers zipping the file and just taking the key is something that massive scale, like Bank of America. Like no one has access to Bank of America. Never happened, but now we saw it in a movie, and now hackers can say, "Oh, this is." So I think that there's a symbiosis between Hollywood, and I'll give Hollywood the credit that they are the best in changing policies of all the entities I've seen in my life. So I think when I came to the US, 15 years ago, I went to grad school. There was a TV series about something, kind of an action movie, but there was a black president. Yeah. And I think Americans started saying, oh, that's not too bad. It doesn't matter. And I think 5 years after, a guy runs for office and people say, oh, I've seen it in a movie. It makes sense. I think gay marriage has a lot to do with Hollywood. They saw kind of gay couples living together and they were doing the same thing. Like they were going to other things, but happened to be gay. People started to see that happening. I think that I gave you examples iconic, but there's TV series about Spanish bank robber. I forget what it's called, like a money something. Something about like a city in Spain. That
heist. Some money heist. Is it that one? Something like that?
Could be. I remember the name in Spanish. It was like something like Paper House or something like this. But what it is, it was set in a city that before the TV series came out, had like tourists at the fraction of a percent. Mm-hmm. The TV series comes out, jumps by like 1,000,000%. Everyone wants to go to, I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever
some city. Same is true for like cities. So Hollywood is really good in making something. Like
okay.
It's basically what dreams do.
You
like
think of an example. This is what I'm looking for. How do we take that effect and apply it to positive, practical visions of how technology can help make a better future?
So I think that
that's possible.
So it's easier to get clicks with scared fear and bad things. So that's true for a lot of things. And Hollywood also does it. But I think that you're thinking, so I'll defend the AI for a second. Mm-hmm. So here's how I'm going to do it. In most Hollywood films, you call it Disney handy. Most Hollywood films, they have set criteria before they even begin. They're 90 minutes long.
Yep.
They need to have a plot line that kind of looks the same way, meaning there's a protagonist, usually a dude, and there's a girl, she's hot. Mm-hmm. They work side by side, but they're not in love yet. but then the AI becomes sentient and starts to destroy the world. And then they come together to fight it. And then they really lose all the way to minute number 75 when they fall in love with each other.
Yeah.
And then through the power of love and empathy,
Yeah.
they actually beat the machines
Yeah.
and the movie ends.
Yeah.
And that plot line is describing right now 90% of the movies that you can imagine and the ones that are being made right now.
Yep.
And I think the reason they landed on this one is basically learning, reinforcement learning, because that's what the audience liked.
Yeah.
And it's because the audience is human.
Yeah.
Once the AI starts making their own movies and they're the audience, it's going to start the same way. But minute number 75, through the power of love and sheer intimacy, the machine's going to kill them all. And then the movie ends with the machines winning. And they're going to just display their own movies and we're going to be... So as long as we're the audience...
Great job, Moran. You really helped make technology more positive.
So I protect them. As long as they are the audience also, the movies are going to be great for them. Like, as long as we're watching it, we pay $20 to see the humans win in the end.
Oh God,
If
we're
you-
doomed. Okay.
I think that there are TV series that made a good job in making it dystopian without trying to solve the problem. And I think that someone needs to come up with a good story that is positive about that. I think that I can easily right now live to you 10 stories about nuclear reactors that are amazing. And they're going to be good, like how it solves
None
climate
of
change.
which is going to win an award for best
I
film.
think if you make one about a nuclear reactor exploding, you're probably going to get more love.
There you
So
go.
that's the nature of humans, that we're brain-wise kind of more, we put a lot more weights on scary things because we don't want to die
Yep.
more than we want to live. Then
Why do people do anything positive? There is some escape code for this. Like people do positive things. They do nice things for each other. They write music. Most of it is dumb now. They used to write awesome tracks in the 80s. And there's other things that people are doing that are positive. So why do they do anything positive if their brains are wired for the scary dystopian shit?
So I'll give you a few answers. So this is now sociology. But I'll give you, first of all, the be wired for scared changes with age. So the younger you are, so your daughter who's 17, a lot more likely to make, if you tell her make a movie, she's going to make a lot more positive ones.
Yeah.
And if you ask a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old, so there's a certain age where when you become adult, you become a lot more worried. So if you pick directors in a certain age, you have more likely. Then you also can pick people that have had very sheltered life and make them, so you build a little bit more. If you take a person which is a little bit nepotism, but a lot of the people in Hollywood who make movies that are optimistic are born in Hollywood, raised the son and daughter of actors in Hollywood, and they've seen a great life, and they make
They're
movies
from
about
California.
Yeah. So
It's all changed now.
You can take that,
Yeah.
and I think that there's also a version where you essentially, the world isn't uniform in like bad things. There are like countries where things are better and so on.
Yeah.
And so people are even as they're, so you can start manifesting more of that. I think that I think of Hollywood is a very good manifestation of the current kind of, it's a finger on the pulse. If the world right now is really afraid of climate change and robots and so on, most of the movies are going to be about that with with kind of scary ending. But the movies about trains are no longer showing them as like a devastating thing because we got over it.
Yeah,
The movies-
right.
So I think
There you go.
So I can imagine like trains are now benign. They just
Yeah.
move people. They don't really
Yeah.
come like in the famous scene of the train coming at
Well,
you.
that's why I say in the long run, the tech wins. It will work.
I agree.
you know.
I think I'm very much optimist about technology, and I think that and now to take for a second step back and to be like on a little bit side of the government and so on. I say like also that I like the fact that I don't like technology running without, and I think that the fact that we find a really nice balance that technology runs faster than people can stop it, but people are also trying to put some guardrails. And there are different countries and they approach it differently. Some regulated, some not. And so I think the world has a strange state where it's net positive, even though like if you look at isolation, it looks like just for a certain village that they had a really bad experience with Facebook and so on, and you say, look, it's bad, then it's bad. But if you look at Norway and it's like, okay.
Before having your kid, and remember you were trying to pick my brain about parenting, I presume that because of how you are, you picked lots of other brains too. Did you come to any meaningful conclusions about how to raise it?
Nothing profound, but
Okay,
nothing I invented. But so I asked other people, and I was asked also the same question myself. So because of this nuclear project, the directors who are making the series said it's great movie thing to have you before and after. So they said, let's sit you down and ask you, that the world could come to an end and that it's like in the hands of 9 people that are very different and so on. And you might bring a boy to a world that's going to end up, why do you do that? And they wanted me to give them the soundbite that says like, kind of like gotcha, like, I don't know what I'm doing and so on. And so I had the before, and now 3 weeks in. I also have the after. I can tell you that still I'm pro.
Yeah.
Still. And I think that what I realized is, and that's kind of not shocking, but I think that kids are very much imitation machines rather than like knowledge machines. So if you tell them don't smoke while you smoke, they probably will smoke and so on. And that's, I think that the effort I make right now is to make home fun. So I told my girlfriend, I said, let's just fun, like play with him, play. I think he will embrace that. I really feel that's true for, I tell my students all the time, and I tell you, and I tell the audience, and I really believe that people learn by osmosis through the people they surround themselves with. Don't try to learn how to be funny. Become friends with comedians. Have 10 comedians in your orbit that you hang out with, have dinner with. You'll see how they respond to timing and their punchline, and you become funnier without ever saying, how do I become funnier? It just will happen.
Yeah. Comedians are such great role models too. You got to have them.
So my people are comedians. I like people who are rule breakers, like hackers or criminals. Like I spend all the time with like people that are doing bad things. They go to jail, have dinner with me, go back to jail. But I like stand-up comedy. I like criminals. I like people that have, in a way, kind of a background that is not from the same country. So they look at it from the outside and they give you. And I think that I never say, teach me, sensei. Like how I just say, if you hang out enough with them, I think I'm hilarious. And I think I'm hilarious not because I read the book, 100 Jewish jokes. It's because I'm spending time with them and so on. And with my kids, the only kind of rule is we should be fun parents. He will become fun kid. That's it.
I think the best thing I was able to do was get my kid around a lot of interesting people in her life.
That's the one lesson.
No, this is great because usually you're asking all the questions because you're so good at picking people's brains. It's a great setup. I got to put you on the spot. I'm really happy about it. First time we met, you told me that you expected me to be a total asshole. And I don't know what you think at this point.
Love you.
Huh?
Love you.
Okay, well, so I'm very curious, and I think people listening anyway might be interested. What gave you the impression that I would be a total asshole? The internet must have led you to believe that. And then how did that play out?
So I fell in love, for the audience to know. But we met surprisingly only later in our life. Where I think that
for years people tried to connect me to you and it never happened.
So we met at an older age where even though I think we're in the same orbit and same circle and same friends and so on for all our lives. So so when we met, I was given a bio, right? So the guy says, here's a bio. I have an aversion for bios. And the more kind of impressive the bio is, it usually gets bigger disappointment. So you basically, you meet a person who, and that's, the bio is who they are. They worked their bio all their life and you get the bio and you get nothing else. Like you say, you meet the guy who was the CEO of this company and you can talk about that. And this is like, it's good to take a picture with him. And then you can say, I met the CEO of this company, but there's no, and so the most interesting thing is when people tell you a story. And what I learned is most people say, you ask, I think I probably asked you, how good are you in sex? On our first meeting, how good a lover are you? And I think you answered. So I think that's the barrier. I think people that have a
listeners will have to find out the hard way. But
I think people have a character. They don't get out of character unless you get them high or they know you very well. And I think with you, the first evening, I can't remember who, but it wasn't just, it was us and other people, which most people are becoming more guarded. Definitely don't. And I'm pretty sure that I always ask a lot of questions, but I rarely get equal amount of answers. Most times I say, I get like a prepared statement. Like, we really care about the environment and we're doing everything we can to say, but
the sanitized PR version.
I think we had. Cool. So that's it. That to me, it's a simple threshold, but like it already, if you can, everything can be said. I think that my fear generally in the world is people are censoring themselves right now, and they give you responses, and so if you meet people who don't, especially when people don't know, like there's no trust in this means that
it's interesting. You have like frameworks for this kind of stuff, which I really don't. Premeditated about anything with people too much. But one thing I've noticed more recently, I've just started to become more aware of is like, I've lived a lot of lives, and you've lived a lot of lives already. And most people just are not doing that. They're living one life. I'm happy about it. You start to realize over time, a lot of people are very constrained.
It's risky. So
It's risky, and I think it probably is a personality thing or something. I think for me, it's like partly having grown up in Alaska. For you, it's probably being from Israel. Everyone there is like growing up with a different sensibility about risk. And so, it makes you open to trying different things and optimizing for different things besides just the predictability and safety, the CEO of it, whatever.
And I think it's built also, if you had bad experience at a young age,
Yeah.
you probably are. So I think I had a few of those, but not enough to. And I think that if you have a few successes, like you, I was raised in the right time, in the right place for technology. This means that I'm not afraid of technology.
Yep.
That was lucky that we were born in the right time, in the right place. But this now is staying forever. Like you can bring a new thing. Like now they invent AI. When they talk about LLM for the first time, I didn't know what it was. Didn't know the term. But I already knew without knowing that it will take me a couple of hours to know everything I need to know about it. That is something that my dad doesn't have.
That's right.
He hears about new technology, says, okay, do I have to am I going to learn TikTok or not? I know that whatever comes after TikTok, I will understand it, even if it's kind of.
Yeah, every technology that's ever come along, I was able to internalize it pretty quickly, especially the computer-related stuff, because I had basis. And I started at the beginning, like you described.
So that's
except for Snapchat. Snapchat is the most hostile piece of software ever made. If you don't feel old, that will make you feel old because nothing about it makes sense.
I still will check because I never played with it.
Snapchat is the only thing you will not comprehend Snapchat, I promise.
So we can attest for the next podcast if I did or not, because I never tried that. I assume that it's easy, but that's an advantage. Like luck, we were born. Then I think you're right. Being born in Israel means that you're surrounded by a lot of people who happen to start startups. Many of them fail. They don't really care that they fail. Many of them succeed. They don't care that they succeed. They all eat the same hummus. So it's not like even that. I think in itself is like a difference between like Israel is a small country. The richest person and the poor person eat in the same restaurant. In the US, you can have people that are so wealthy that they really live in a different gated community and you don't see them. You don't encounter by chance on the street any of those people. So like, imagine that they have a different lifestyle. They don't, but you imagine that. Like you imagine probably they eat different food, and that is a benefit of a small country compared to it. So all of those small things, I can name a few, but all of those small things, I think they make you at the end, you're lucky.
Yeah, it's super cool. I used to go to Tel Aviv a lot. And, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Israeli, but I got scooped up there. When you go to Tel Aviv, I've been going for 20 years, and it's the only place I've been where it feels like they have the dynamics that make Silicon Valley awesome, or did. I don't feel that way anywhere else on earth.
I agree. That's kind of the same through thick and thin. A lot of things happen in Israel, and this is kind of the underlying thing that survives. Has to do with the military, like everyone goes there, has to do with like the small size, has to do with the lack of resources. There's no oil and gas in Israel. You better know how to code.